Tonight we stand beneath a sky that has no alphabet, no royal chronicle, and no carved lore. You're not in a library, not yet, and no scribe waits with a reed stylus. You're somewhere older, closer to the first long patience of the human mind. Above you, the stars turn in silence, and below you, the earth keeps its older records in stone, ash, bone, and buried light. In the 20th century, archaeologists studying prehistoric monuments began noticing something quietly difficult to dismiss. Many ancient structures seemed carefully placed towards sunrise, moonrise, bright stars, or seasonal turning points. Researchers connected with Oxford, Cambridge, and other major universities have studied sites such as Stonehenge, Newgrange, and prehistoric enclosures across Europe. Their findings do not prove a lost empire. That would be too easy. They do show something stranger and perhaps more human. Long before writing, people were watching the sky with remarkable care. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the night settles around you, leave your location and your local time in the comments. It is oddly comforting to imagine all these small glowing screens under different pieces of the same old sky. You let your mind drift back beyond cities, beyond bronze, beyond temples with names. The world becomes colder, wider, and less crowded. Grass bends under a wind that smells of damp soil and animal hide. Somewhere nearby, a fire makes small clicking sounds. Smoke climbs into darkness, then disappears among stars so bright they seem almost close enough to bruise the fingertips. There are no clocks here. There are only returns. The moon returns, thinner, then swollen, then gone. The sun returns along the horizon, but never to the same place for long. Certain stars vanish for a season, then rise again before dawn. Birds move, herds move, rains come, frost follows. You begin to understand that the sky is not decoration. It is a warning system. It is a calendar. It is a roof covered in signs. And perhaps, in a time no one remembers clearly, it becomes sacred. The phrase, zero civilization, sounds grand. Almost suspiciously grand. Like something whispered by a man in a linen suit beside a questionable documentary reenactment. Yet, we can use it gently. Not as a claim of pyramids beneath every hill, but as a question. What if there was no single lost empire at all? What if there was instead a scattered inheritance of sky knowledge, passed through rituals, alignments, stories, and stones? Not a kingdom, a pattern. Mainstream records confirm that writing appears relatively late in the long story of humanity. The earliest known writing systems rise in Mesopotamia and Egypt only after thousands of years of symbolic behaviour, settlement, trade, burial custom, and monument building. That fact matters, because it reminds you how much memory once lived outside books. A society without writing is not a society without thought. It simply stores thought differently. It stores it in repetition. It stores it in ceremony. It stores it in the body. You picture a line of people walking before dawn. Their feet press into cold ground. No one says much, because the hour itself seems to require quiet. An elder leads them toward a ridge where two stones frame a pale seam in the east. For many mornings the sun has risen elsewhere, but today it will return to the notch. Today the year turns. Today the people see proof that the heavens are still keeping their agreement. Such moments may be the true beginning of sacred astronomy. Not equations first, not charts first, or first. A quirky tidbit often circles around prehistoric sky traditions, and it is too strange not to mention. Some researchers and independent writers have suggested that certain Ice Age animal images might record star groups or seasonal markers. The idea is debated, and sometimes stretched far beyond comfort. Still, the possibility has a peculiar charm. Imagine a bison painted on a cave wall, not only as prey, spirit, or memory, but also as a shape that once rose in the winter sky. That does not mean every painted animal is a constellation. Ancient people had dinner to worry about, not just cosmic poetry, but survival and sky watching were never truly separate. The animal trail, the river flood, the mating season, the first thaw, the dangerous cold, all of these belong to time, and time, when no calendar hangs on a wall, must be watched with the whole body. You feel the roughness of stone under your palm. It is damp in the hollow places, warm where the firelight touches it. Someone has made marks here, not letters, but marks with rhythm, lines, dots, repeated cuts, a pattern too deliberate to be accident, yet too distant to translate with confidence. This is where the mystery begins to breathe. An open scholarly debate remains over how much astronomical intention can safely be read into prehistoric monuments. Some archaeologists caution that alignments may happen by chance, especially when many stones and many horizon points are involved. Others argue that repeated patterns, careful construction, and seasonal light effects reveal deliberate observation. Both positions matter. One protects us from fantasy, the other protects us from underestimating the dead. And underestimating the dead is a modern habit. You stand in a world where memory has weight. A stone can mean winter, a notch can mean return. A burial can face dawn because the living hope the dead may rise with light. There is no need for written doctrine yet. The landscape itself is the scripture, and the sky turns the pages at a speed no hand can hurry. You begin to see how a civilization before writing might map the stars without paper. It could map them with walking routes, with standing stones, with songs timed to seasons, with stories tied to animals, with ceremonies repeated on the same cold morning each year. It could map them through generations of watchers, each inheriting a sky already crowded with meaning. Perhaps that is the hidden timeline we are really approaching. Not a lost metropolis shining with impossible machines, although people do enjoy those tales. Bless their dramatic little hearts. The deeper possibility is quieter. Before recorded history, human beings may have built a mental architecture of the heavens. They may have carried it through migrations, painted it in darkness, buried it with their dead, and aligned it with the first gold edge of sunrise. In that sense, the zero civilization is not necessarily a place. It is a threshold. It is the moment when watching becomes remembering. It is the moment when remembering becomes ritual. It is the moment when ritual becomes a map, and the map becomes sacred. Though no one has yet invented a word for sacred that we can read, the fire lowers beside you. The stars seem sharper now, as if the dark has been washed clean. Somewhere, a child is shown the bright points that return before the cold. Somewhere, an old woman counts the moon by touch and memory. Somewhere, a hunter learns that the heavens do not merely shine, they announce. And perhaps, long before recorded history, the first great observatory was not built from stone at all. Perhaps it was the patient human neck, tilted upward night after night, beneath a sky that looked back without speaking. You walk into a land where the stones have been waiting longer than memory. The air is cool at first, almost blue, and the grass is heavy with dew. Each step darkens the hem of your clothing. Somewhere beyond the low ridge, unseen birds begin making cautious sounds. The world does not wake suddenly here. It loosens itself from darkness, one small breath at a time. Ahead of you, the first stones rise. They are not polished like palace walls. They do not flatter the eye with symmetry. Some lean slightly, like tired giants listening to news from below. Others stand blunt and patient, their surfaces rough with lichen, frost, and the slow chewing of weather. You notice how they do not seem placed for beauty alone. They seem positioned for waiting for light. Records from modern archaeology confirm that many prehistoric monuments were built with enormous labour before the first written histories of their builders appeared. Stonehenge in southern Britain, Newgrange in Ireland, and other megalithic sites across the Atlantic edge of Europe reveal careful planning, transport, burial practice, and repeated use. Scholars connected with Oxford, University College London, and major field projects have shown that these places were not random heaps of stone. They were landscapes of intention. Yet intention is not always easy to translate. You stand between two upright stones, and the wind slips through them with a soft, hollow note. It smells of wet leaves, sheep wool, and distant peat smoke. The horizon is still dim, but one line in the east begins to pale. You begin to understand the basic genius of the old builders. They did not need a written chart to make the sky speak. They needed fixed points on Earth. A stone makes a memory visible. Place one stone where the sun rises at midsummer. Place another where it rises in winter. Return each year, and the place becomes a living diagram. Bring children, and they learn without needing to read. Bring the dead, and perhaps the same light that wakes the year may touch their bones. Bring the community, and suddenly a horizon becomes a shared belief. This is sacred astronomy at its most physical. It is not distant calculation, floating in the clean air of an observatory. It is mud under the fingernails. It is rope fibre cutting the palm. It is the stubborn movement of stone over land. It is a group of people deciding that the sky deserves architecture. For a moment, it feels as though the stones are less like monuments than instruments. A flute waits for breath. A drum waits for the hand. These stones wait for the sun, for the moon, for the slow arrival of a shadow in the right place. Their music is silence measured across generations. At Newgrange, in the Boyne Valley of Ireland, records confirm a striking winter solstice effect. Around the shortest days of the year, sunlight enters the passage and reaches into the chamber, briefly illuminating a space otherwise held in darkness. The structure is older than the pyramids of Egypt, which is the sort of detail that makes modern confidence shift uncomfortably in its chair. People so often imagine prehistory as vague, simple, and smoky. Then a beam of winter sunlight enters a tomb with architectural precision, and the old assumption quietly looks away. Cold light enters the dark. You can picture the chamber. The air is still, and the stone smells mineral and ancient. People gather in silence, perhaps with ash on their hands, perhaps with offerings, perhaps with stories that have no surviving words. Outside, the land lies under winter. Inside, a golden blade slips along the passage. It touches the stones. It touches the waiting faces. This is not merely a date. It is a return made visible. A quirky tidbit attaches itself to some of these megalithic places, especially in folk tradition. People have long believed that certain stones can heal sickness, aid fertility, or refuse to be counted accurately. One old story says a stone circle can never be numbered the same way twice. Naturally, any sensible person with a notebook might object. Still, the tale captures something important. These stones were not only measured, they were also feared, courted, joked about, and folded into local imagination. Even scholarship cannot fully drain them of strangeness. The ancient builders shaped entire landscapes into memory systems. A mound might connect to a sunrise. A stone avenue might lead toward a river. A burial chamber might point toward a seasonal event. A nearby hill might frame the moon at rare moments. Each feature works with the others, not like a single sentence, but like a slow chant where meaning gathers through repetition. You pause beside one fallen stone, running your fingers over its cold side. It is not smooth. Small grains catch your skin. Lichen makes pale islands across its surface. The stone is heavy in a way that feels moral, as if moving it required not only strength but agreement. Someone had to choose the quarry. Someone had to feed the workers. Someone had to persuade others that this labour mattered. That persuasion may be the hidden structure beneath sacred astronomy. To build with the sky, a community must agree that the sky's worth building for. They must trust that the returning light will return again. They must believe that an alignment seen once can matter forever, or at least long enough to become ancestral. An open scholarly debate continues over whether every proposed alignment reflects real prehistoric intent. Archaeologists warn that when many monuments survive in complex landscapes, some lines will inevitably point towards something impressive, yet careful patterns, especially repeated solar orientations, remain difficult to dismiss. The debate is not a cold argument over angles. It is a deeper question about how ancient minds joined Earth, death, and time. You're not asked to choose too quickly. The zero civilization, if such a phrase is allowed to breathe softly, may not have left behind royal seals or city walls. It may have left behind habits instead. Look east at a certain time. Walk a certain path before dawn. Place the dead where the reborn sun can find them. Teach the child that the world has hinges and the heavens swing upon them. In many prehistoric places, stones may have served as anchors for invisible knowledge. Without writing, knowledge can still be exact. A singer can remember hundreds of lines. A navigator can read currents and stars. A farmer can sense a change in wind and know what comes. Modern life often mistakes paper for intelligence. The older world did not have that luxury, so memory became muscular. Memory lived in feet, hands, eyes, and repetition. You notice how the stones change as daylight grows. At first they were shapes in darkness. Now each one has a side of shadow and a side of faint silver. The circle becomes less mysterious, but more impressive. Mystery is easy in the dark. Precision in daylight is harder to ignore. Perhaps this is what the old builders wanted, not to escape the world, but to bind themselves more deeply to it. The sky was too vast for human hands, so they answered with stones. The year was too large to hold in thought, so they placed markers along its turning. Death was too final to accept without reply, so they opened chambers to the returning sun. Nothing here says that a forgotten empire ruled the earth. Nothing here requires a vanished machine or a master race of astronomers with suspiciously convenient beards. The stones tell a slower story. They suggest communities patient enough to notice, organized enough to build, and reverent enough to return. The horizon brightens. The first sunlight touches the upper edge of one upright stone. No voice announces it. No inscription explains it. Yet the place seems to understand itself. You stand quietly among stones that remember without words, and the morning moves through them like an old thought becoming visible again. Your gaze lowers from the high stars to the dark edge of the world, there, where land meets sky. The first astronomers find their simplest instrument, not glass, not bronze, not a polished lens held by a scholar with ink on his sleeve, only the horizon, that long, uneven line of hill, tree, water, and stone, where the sun appears to enter the human story each morning. You stand on a ridge before sunrise. The ground is firm beneath your feet, but the air carries the chill of a night not ready to leave. Far below, reeds whisper around a marsh. Somewhere close, a leather strap creaks as someone shifts their weight. No one speaks yet. Everyone faces east. The horizon is the first map. A mainstream fact sits quietly behind this ancient scene. Researchers from major universities, including Oxford and Leicester, have studied prehistoric and early agricultural landscapes where monuments, tombs, and timber circles appear connected to solar events. The idea is not that every stone is a perfect observatory. The stronger point is simpler. Many ancient communities watched sunrise and sunset positions carefully enough to make them part of ritual design. That careful watching begins with a humble discovery. The sun does not rise from the same point every day. It travels along the horizon through the year, sliding northward, then southward, then pausing near its limits. Those pauses become powerful. They mark the long day, the short day, the turning of warmth, the return of scarcity, the promise that darkness has limits. You might think this is obvious. Of course the sun moves. Of course seasons change. Yet obvious things become sacred when survival depends upon them. A modern calendar hides the drama with tidy boxes. Prehistoric people had no printed page whispering that winter would end. They had to learn it from light, frost, hunger, and memory. The first horizon maps were not drawn flat. They were inhabited. You imagine people returning to the same watching place for decades. A certain notch between hills catches the midsummer sunrise. A distant tree, older than most living people, marks a spring morning. A pair of stones frames the winter light. Over time, these points become familiar enough to feel like beings with personalities. The sun enters through one gate, vanishes through another, and the year becomes a great house with many doors. At dawn, colour gathers slowly. Black turns to iron. Iron becomes ash. Ash takes on a thin line of rose. Then, suddenly, the upper rim of the sun touches the earth, and every face before it changes. Eyes narrow. Breath shows pale in the cold. The watchers do not need a priestly lecture. Light itself has arrived as evidence. It happens without applause. There is a strange intimacy in horizon astronomy. The observer must know one place deeply. A traveller passing once might see only a pretty sunrise and continue on, perhaps feeling poetic for several unbearable minutes. The watcher who returns every week sees change. The elder who returns every year sees pattern. The community that returns for generations sees law, and law in a world without writing may first appear as repetition in nature. Records from early farming societies confirm that seasonal timing was essential for planting, harvesting, storing food, and managing animals. Archaeobotanical studies in the Near East and Europe show how closely human survival came to depend on rhythms of rain, heat, and growing seasons. Sacred astronomy was not separate from bread. It helped decide when seeds entered soil and when people dared to trust the coming warmth. The sacred and practical are twins here. They share a blanket. A quirky fringe tidbit sometimes enters this discussion through claims about very ancient horizon lines, connecting distant sites across whole continents. Some enthusiasts imagine vast prehistoric surveyors arranging sacred places into enormous hidden grids. Most scholars remain unconvinced by the grandest versions of that claim. Still, the fascination reveals something true about human longing. People want the land to contain a secret geometry, because the sky itself already seems to contain one. The safer mystery is enough. A local horizon can hold a complete cosmos. One hilltop may mark a solstice. One valley gap may catch an equinox dawn. One standing stone may indicate where a bright star rises before a season changes. Even without continental grids, the achievement is profound. Humans learn to turn place into prediction. You feel a flat stone beneath your hand. Its top has shallow cups worn into the surface. Rainwater rests in them, reflecting the fading stars. No one can say with certainty what every cup mark meant. Some may have been symbolic, some may have held offerings, some may have counted events. Yet their presence changes the stone. It becomes not just a marker, but a surface of attention. Touch becomes memory. An open scholarly debate remains over how much prehistoric skywatching was carried by specialists. Were these observations known widely among farmers, hunters, and families, or guarded by ritual experts who gained authority from celestial timing? Some researchers argue for communal seasonal knowledge. Others see the early rise of sacred officials, people whose power grew from knowing when the heavens would turn. Both possibilities can live together. A whole community may know that winterlight returns through a sacred gap, while only certain elders know the longer sequence of moons, stars, and ceremonies. Public knowledge and hidden knowledge often grow from the same root. The visible sunrise teaches everyone. The deep account belongs to those who keep watch when others sleep. The first horizon map may have been spoken as a story. The sun travels to the deer hill, then to the stone tooth, then to the hollow where the dead listen. At the cold turning, it touches the sleeping chamber. At the warm turning, it climbs from the ridge of birds. Such language would not be childish. It would be precise in the form available to it. You do not need numbers to be accurate. You need consistency, night after night, morning after morning. Ancient watchers trained their eyes on edges, the edge of the moon, the edge of the hill, the edge of darkness. Their science was slow, and their spirituality was slower still. A single human life might not be long enough to notice every pattern, so knowledge had to pass from mouth to mouth, gesture to gesture, winter to winter. Here the idea of a zero civilization changes shape again. It does not appear as one capital city commanding the world. It appears as a network of patient horizons. Many groups, separated by mountains, rivers, forests, and seas, may have discovered similar methods because they faced the same sky. Their maps were local, yet their questions were shared. Where will the light return? When will the cold loosen? What does the sky require from us? The sun rises higher now, warming your face. Behind you, shadows stretch long across the grass, turning bodies and stones into dark fingers pointing west. The watchers begin to move. Someone laughs softly, as though relief has been permitted. Someone lifts a child so they can see over shoulders. Someone places a small offering on the ground, not because the sun needs it, but because gratitude needs a shape. By full daylight, the sacred line has vanished into ordinary landscape. The notch is only a notch again. The stones are only stones. The marsh smells of mud and waking insects. Yet something has been confirmed, quietly and completely. The year has a structure. The earth can remember the sky, and you, standing in the brightening silence, begin to feel how the oldest maps were not made to show people where to travel. They were made to show time where to enter. You descend where the sky should not be visible at all. The entrance is low, almost shy, half hidden by stone and shadow. Outside, the night still spreads across the open land, but inside the earth, the darkness is thicker. It feels older than night. You lower your head, step carefully, and let the cool breath of the cave touch your face. The smell changes first. Damp limestone replaces grass and smoke. Clay rises underfoot with a soft grip. Somewhere deeper within, water drops from the ceiling at long intervals. Each sound small and exact. Your eyes adjust slowly. The wall beside you begins as nothing, then becomes surface, then becomes a place where hands once moved with purpose. A red line appears in the dim light, then another, then the body of an animal seems to gather itself from stone. The great painted caves of Ice Age Europe confirm one of the most astonishing facts in human history. Long before cities, writing, or metal tools, human beings entered deep chambers and created images of remarkable skill. Places such as Lascaux, Chauvet, and Altamira preserve horses, bison, lions, signs, dots, handprints, and forms that still disturb the quiet mind. Studies by archaeologists and specialists connected with universities such as Cambridge and Bordeaux have shown that these images belong to complex symbolic worlds, not idle decoration. You stand before a painted horse, its head lifted as if it hears something beyond you. The body is not stiff, it has movement. The artist knew the animal well enough to honour its weight, its speed, its heat. In the flicker of a small flame, the horse almost seems to breathe. Its legs tremble with illusion as the light shifts. This is not a gallery. This is a chamber of presence. Some scholars have suggested that cave art may preserve aspects of ritual, hunting memory, trance experience, teaching, or social identity. The others have explored possible connections between certain painted animals in the night sky. The idea is delicate. It must be handled carefully because the human mind loves turning every ancient mark into a secret code. Still, there are moments when the cave seems to invite comparison with the heavens. You look upward. The ceiling curves like a dark dome. Painted animals move across it in uneven clusters. Dots gather near them, sometimes scattered, sometimes patterned. The fire makes them appear and disappear, just as stars appear and disappear behind smoke, cloud, and dawn. You begin to sense why someone might carry the sky underground. Not the physical sculptor, of course. A remembered sky? There is a mainstream fact worth holding steady. Archaeologists generally agree that Upper Paleolithic cave art reveals advanced symbolic behaviour among early humans. It shows that people could create shared meanings, return to special places, and invest effort in images placed far from ordinary daylight. That fact alone is enough to quiet any lazy picture of prehistoric minds as simple or dull. These were people of memory, skill, and imagination. And yes, probably people who occasionally complained about the walk into the cave. You pass a wall covered in handprints. Some are outlined in red pigment, made by blowing colour around fingers pressed against stone. The gesture feels startlingly near. A hand reaches from 30,000 years ago, not with a sentence, but with shape. You can almost feel the breath that made it. Someone placed their palm here and left the absence of themselves behind. It is a strange kind of star. The quirky tidbit here belongs to a lively fringe argument about the famous shaft seen at Lascaux. Some independent researchers have proposed that its bird, bison, and human figure may represent constellations or a record of a celestial event. Mainstream scholars remain cautious, often preferring interpretations tied to myth, ritual, danger, or visionary experience. Yet the scene remains haunting because it refuses to become simple. A fallen figure, a wounded animal, a bird on a staff, and a rhinoceros nearby make a puzzle no one has fully solved. The cave keeps its manners. It does not explain itself. In sacred astronomy, caves present a paradox. They are places where the visible sky is absent, yet they may intensify cosmic thought. When you remove the daily world, the mind fills the darkness with remembered forms. The deep chamber becomes a night within the earth. The torch becomes a moving star. The painted animal becomes a shape held between survival and spirit. Imagine a group entering after dusk. Their steps are careful. Their lamps are made of stone, fat, and fibre. The flame trembles in the airless passage. A child is led by the hand, perhaps frightened, perhaps proud to be included. An elder stops before a wall where dots and animals appear only when flame touches them. The elder speaks softly. The chamber listens better than any open field. Words do not survive here, but rhythm might have. Sound behaves strangely inside caves. A whisper can bloom. A footstep can multiply. Research into painted chambers has noticed that some decorated areas have unusual acoustic qualities. Though interpretations vary, perhaps images, chant, and echo once belonged together. Perhaps a painted herd on the wall seemed to move when voices pulsed around it. Perhaps star stories sounded different when spoken beneath stone. You feel the cave answering every breath. An open scholarly debate continues over whether certain marks in Ice Age caves were early notations, ritual signs, clan symbols, or something closer to astronomical markers. Some researchers argue that repeated dots, lines, and animal pairings may contain seasonal information. Others warn that the evidence is too fragmentary, and that modern pattern seeking can be a very enthusiastic little troublemaker. The debate matters because it touches the border between art and record. What counts as a map? A map does not always need coastlines. It can map fear. It can map migration. It can map the time when horses return, when salmon run, when the moon fattens, when winter teeth begin to loosen. If animals and stars both told people when to move, hunt, gather, or gather together. Then a cave wall could become a layered memory surface, not a sky chart in the modern sense, but a sacred arrangement of time. You notice that many painted creatures are powerful, dangerous, or deeply necessary. Bison, horses, lions, rhinoceroses, mammoths. These are not casual doodles made while someone waited for soup. They belong to a world where animal life was the great companion and threat. To link such beings with the sky would not be absurd. The heavens themselves often become animals in later cultures across the world. Bull, scorpion, lion, bird, serpent. The pattern is old, Perhaps the cave teaches that constellations were never only points of light. They were living forms placed onto darkness by memory. A person sees stars, then remembers animals. Another sees animals, then remembers seasons, over generations. The wall, the hunt, the sky, and the story fold into one another until no clean separation remains. The Zero civilization seen through this underground darkness becomes even less like an empire and more like a human condition. It is the civilization of pattern before script. It is the shared ability to turn observation into meaning before anyone writes a word for astronomy. It is found in the mind that looks at scattered lights and says, "There is a shape there." It is found in the hand that paints that shape where night can never end. The flame lowers. Shadows stretch across the painted bodies. A horse disappears. A bison returns. Dots above them glimmer briefly in the lamp glow, then sink again into stone. You stand quietly, and the chamber feels less like a room than a memory of the sky held inside the earth. Outside, stars continue turning over the sleeping land. Inside, their possible echoes remain on the wall, patient, dim, and unresolved. Your feet carry you out across a plain where the grass moves like dark water. The night has thinned, but dawn still holds back behind the low hills. In the distance, a herd shifts restlessly. You hear hooves pressing into damp soil, the wet tear of grazing, the soft snort of an animal lifting its head. The air smells of crushed herbs, old ash, and the warm musk of living bodies. Above, the stars remain. Below, the animals listen. This is where heaven and hunger meet. Long before anyone divides the world into nature, a religion, and science, the hunter watches everything at once. The track in the mud, the fatness of the moon, the direction of geese, the flowering of a shrub, the first frost along a riverbank, all belong to one great field of signs. Nothing is merely background. The world is speaking everywhere, which is inconvenient, of course, because it rarely speaks in complete sentences. You crouch near a footprint pressed into the soft ground. It is fresh. Water gathers in the hollow of the hoof mark, reflecting a faint star. For a moment, the earth seems to hold the sky inside the trail of an animal. That image is almost too neat, almost too poetic, but ancient life often made poetry out of necessity. A hunter who ignores signs does not remain poetic for long. Mainstream research confirms that many prehistoric communities depended on deep knowledge of animal migrations, breeding cycles, and seasonal landscapes. Archaeologists studying Ice Age sites through animal bones, cut marks, and settlement patterns have shown that hunting was not random wandering. It required planning, cooperation, memory, and environmental intelligence. Work associated with institutions such as Cambridge, Oxford, and the Smithsonian has helped reveal how closely early people tracked animal behaviour across time. That time was often celestial. The return of certain stars before dawn could suggest the approach of seasonal change. The swelling moon might brighten a night hunt or alter the movement of animals near open ground. The length of daylight shaped grazing, thaw, plant growth, and human travel. The sky did not cause every hoofbeat, but it helped frame the world in which hoofbeats mattered. You watch the herd begin to move. Their bodies are dark shapes first, then brown, then touched with silver as the edge of morning grows. A young animal stumbles and finds its balance. An older one turns, nostrils wide, sensing danger where you cannot. The whole group suddenly flows eastward, as if pulled by one invisible cord. The sky also moves like that. In later cultures, constellations often take animal forms. Bulls, lions, birds, serpents, scorpions, goats, fish, and bears populate the heavens with familiar bodies. This does not prove that Ice Age people use the same star figures, because proof is a stubborn guest and rarely arrives when invited. Yet it does suggest a durable human habit. People look upward and organise scattered lights through the creatures that dominate their lives. Animals make the sky memorable. A child can remember a great bull more easily than a group of unrelated points. A story about a fleeing deer can carry seasonal timing across generations. A bird rising before dawn can mark a migration, a wind shift, or a ceremonial gathering. When the sky becomes animal, time becomes easier to teach. Your mind drifts toward painted walls again, but the plane gives those images a living body. The animal on stone was not an abstract symbol to the people who made it. It was meat, danger, beauty, spirit, weather sign, social event, and possibly a star pattern. One creature could carry many meanings because ancient categories were not narrow little boxes. Modern categories do love their boxes. They label them carefully, stack them neatly, then act surprised when the past refuses to climb inside. A quirky fringe tidbit often appears in discussions of prehistoric animals and constellations. Some writers claim that the famous bull paintings in caves represent the star cluster, later known in Greek tradition as the Pleiades near the shoulder of Taurus. Mainstream researchers treat this with caution because similar shapes can happen by chance. Still, the suggestion persists because the pairing feels strangely compelling. A strong animal, a cluster of points, a season of return. It is not proof, but it is a doorway into an older imagination. You walk through that doorway carefully. The hunter sees a sky full of timing. If a bright star rises just before dawn during the season when herds move, it may become part of the herd's story. If a cluster appears when calves are born, the cluster may become a sign of birth. If a red star glows during dry months, it may gather a reputation for heat, danger, or blood. Over generations, observation thickens into myth. Myth is not the enemy of memory. It is one of memory's oldest shelters. An open, scholarly debate continues over whether prehistoric animal images can be interpreted as constellations, seasonal calendars, or symbolic systems tied mainly to ritual and social identity. Some researchers argue that repeated animal patterns across distant sites suggest shared structures of meaning. Others answer that similar animals appear because people hunted similar creatures, feared similar predators, and admired similar forms. Both views keep the discussion alive, and the silence of the evidence keeps everyone modest. At least on good days. You stop near a cluster of bones weathering from the soil. They are pale and smooth at the edges, opened by age, gnawed by smaller mouths, touched by rain. To modern eyes, bones can seem like endings. To ancient people, they may also have been records. The age of an animal, the season of death, the marrow within, the marks of tools. All could tell a story to those trained to read them. The sky leaves records too, but not in bone. It repeats. That repetition may have allowed hunters and gatherers to create a living calendar without carving a single formal symbol. When the cold star rises, prepare the hides. When the bird path returns, follow the river. When the moon is dark, move quietly. When it is full, gather, sing, trade, or watch for predators. These rules might never be written, yet they could remain precise for centuries. You hear voices now, low and careful. A group has gathered behind a rise, watching the herd through the pale light. One person gestures toward the east, another touches a charm made from bone. A third watches the sky rather than the animals, perhaps measuring the morning against a memory learned from elders. The hunt is not only muscle and spear, it is timing, patience, and restraint. The heavens train restraint. You cannot hurry a star into rising. You cannot drag the moon into fullness. Sacred astronomy teaches waiting, and hunting teaches the same lesson with sharper consequences. Move too soon, and the herd scatters. Plant too early, and frost kills. Hold ceremony on the wrong day, and the community feels the disorder. Time must be courted, not commanded. In this world, animals may become the bridge between earthly survival and celestial order. Their bodies move across land as constellations move across the dark. Their migrations teach direction. Their breeding teaches season. Their danger teaches humility. Their abundance teaches gratitude. To follow them is to follow the year made flesh. The sun rises at last, spilling a dull gold over the plain. The stars fade one by one, but their memory remains in the minds of those who watch them. The herd continues beyond the ridge, and the people begin their careful pursuit. Dust lifts around their ankles, breath grows warm, the day opens. You understand now that sacred astronomy did not begin in a quiet study, separate from the smell of animals and the ache of hunger. It began in a world where the sky, the hunt, and the body were joined. The oldest star maps may have carried hoofbeats, wing beats, claw marks, and the patient gaze of people who knew that heaven was never far from the next meal. You sit beside a small fire while the moon climbs through a veil of thin cloud. The night is quiet, but not empty. Beetles move under dry leaves. A branch snaps somewhere beyond the circle of light. Ash settles on the ground in pale flakes, like the dust of something older than flame. In your hand rests a narrow bone, polished by touch, marked with careful notches. The marks are small. They are also stubborn. They refuse to behave like scratches made without thought. Some appear grouped, some are spaced unevenly, as if the maker paused, counted, returned, and cut again. You turn the bone slowly near the fire. Each notch catches a thread of orange light. It is not writing. It does not tell the story in words. Yet it seems to hold time in a way the hand can feel. This is the hidden calendar. Mainstream research confirms that prehistoric people made marked bones, antlers, stones, and portable objects long before formal writing appeared. Some of these objects have been interpreted as tallies, lunar counts, hunting records, or ritual devices. Scholars connected with universities such as Harvard, Yale, and Oxford have discussed famous examples from Ice Age contexts, though interpretations remain cautious. The simple fact stands firm. People were marking sequences. That is no small thing. To mark a sequence is to believe that one moment relates to another. A cut made today matters because another cut was made yesterday, and another will be made tomorrow. Counting turns the flowing world into something held. The moon becomes not only beautiful, not only frightening, not only useful for walking at night, it becomes countable. You look up, and the moon is not full, it is curved, bright on one side, fading into darkness on the other. In a few nights it will swell. Later it will round itself completely. Later still it will shrink, disappear, and return as a thin white hook near the sun. No animal keeps such a visible rhythm. No river displays its cycle so clearly. The moon teaches counting by changing its face. It is the oldest clock in the dark. A person without writing can still know that the moon's phases follow a pattern of roughly 29.5 days. They may not state it in that language. They may not divide it through arithmetic on a tablet, but they can observe the return. They can mark nights. They can link the moon to tides, bleeding, birth, travel, hunting, ceremony, and fear. The body and sky begin to answer one another. Beside you, an elder takes the bone and touches the notches with a thumb. One by one, slowly. The gesture is not casual. It resembles prayer, but also accounting, which is very human. Even sacred things apparently appreciate good record-keeping. The elder does not need to announce a theory. The thumb knows where the count has reached. Records from the study of hunter-gatherer and early farming societies confirm that lunar cycles have often been important for organizing ritual life, travel, and subsistence activity. Ethnographic comparisons must be used carefully, because living communities are not fossils of the ancient past. Still, they show how oral societies can maintain complex calendars through observation, memory, song, and social practice. A calendar does not require a wall. It requires agreement. When the moon is this shape, people gather. When it is that shape, they move camp. When darkness is deepest, certain stories may be told. When the full moon brightens the open ground, night travel becomes easier, and so does being seen. Every phase has a mood. Every mood becomes useful. You feel the air cool around your shoulders. Smoke clings to your hair and clothing. The bone returns to your palm, and you notice something else. It is portable. A stone circle ties memory to one place. A marked bone allows memory to travel. It can cross a valley, a river, a generation. It can be hidden in a pouch and brought out under the right sky. That portability changes the mystery. The zero civilization, if imagined as a deep pattern rather than a lost throne, may have lived partly in objects like this. Small, handled, easily overlooked objects. A bone tally, a carved antler, a pebble with repeated lines, a piece of ochre marked with rhythm. These are not grand monuments. They are intimate devices, closer to breath than architecture. They suggest that the sky was mapped not only in landscapes, but in hands. A quirky tidbit comes from the long argument over the Ishango bone, found in Central Africa and famous for its grouped markings. Some writers have suggested it shows advanced arithmetic or even lunar counting. Others say the claims go too far, and the pattern may reflect tallying without the elaborate mathematics sometimes imagined. The object remains fascinating because it sits at the crossroads of counting, memory, and desire. People want the first numbers to feel cosmic. Perhaps sometimes they were. You run your finger along the notches again. They do not reveal their owner. Was the maker counting moons, animals, days of travel, menstrual cycles, debts, rituals, or something more private? The silence is complete. Yet silence is not emptiness. It is a boundary around the possible. An open scholarly debate continues over whether certain prehistoric marks represent true lunar calendars or more general tally systems. Some researchers point to repeated groupings that resemble moon phase sequences. Others warn that patterns can be imposed too easily by modern eyes trained to love charts. The tension is useful. It keeps wonder awake without letting it run wild into the bushes. Still, even caution must admit this. Counting appeared before writing, and counting changed the human relationship with time. The first calendars may have been made for hunger. They may have helped track herds, ripening plants, or dangerous weather. They may have been made for bodies, especially cycles of fertility and birth. They may have been made for the dead, guiding ceremonies at proper intervals. They may have been made because the moon itself seemed alive, wounded, healed, devoured, and reborn. The hidden calendar is hidden because it was never only one thing. You watch a young person sitting near the elder. Their eyes are fixed on the bone. Perhaps they are learning the count. Perhaps they are learning when to begin a journey, when to prepare a feast, when to expect the return of a season. The lesson is quiet. No grand speech breaks the dark. A hand moves. A notch is touched. A moon is remembered. This is how a civilization without writing protects itself from forgetting. Not perfectly. Never perfectly. A storm can destroy a camp. A death can break a chain of teaching. A migration can change the horizon. But repeated marks help memory survive the weakness of flesh. They turn time into texture. They let the fingers walk where the mind might stumble. The fire drops lower. The moon rises higher. Its light is colder than flame, but steadier across the open ground. The bone in your hand seems almost lunar now, pale, curved, and marked by shadows. It is a small thing, yet it carries a large suspicion. Somewhere before written history, people may have learned to place the sky into sequences, and sequences into objects. You breathe slowly and listen to the night count itself. One drop from a leaf, one crack from the embers, one distant call from an unseen bird. Above you, the moon continues its patient arithmetic, needing no witness, yet gathering witnesses anyway. And beneath that silver light, the first calendar waits in the palm, not speaking, but still keeping time. You arrive where the earth has been lifted into shapes too deliberate to dismiss. The ground is not simply ground anymore. It rises in mounds, settles into terraces, opens into trenches, and gathers around pillars that do not belong to ordinary shelter. There are no palace gates here. No throne room waits behind a painted wall. Yet the place feels planned with a seriousness that makes the skin grow quiet. Wind moves across the stones. It carries dust, dry grass, and the faint sour smell of old soil. Your feet find a path worn by many steps, though no one living remembers the first walker. Around you, the landscape has the peculiar stillness of a place made for gathering, waiting, and looking upward. It is not a village in the simple sense. It is not just a camp. It is something stranger, standing between need and belief. A temple before temples. Mainstream archaeology confirms that monumental ritual sites existed before the rise of many fully urban societies. The most famous example is Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, where large stone pillars carved with animals were erected by people who lived before widespread farming in that region. Scholars from institutions including the University of Chicago, Stanford, and major German archaeological teams have discussed how this site complicates older assumptions about the order of civilization. It suggests that ritual gathering may have helped shape settled life, not merely follow it. That's a quiet reversal. For a long time, many people imagine the sequence as simple. First farming, then villages, then surplus, then temples, then priests gazing importantly at the heavens. But some prehistoric sites seem to whisper another possibility. Perhaps sacred gathering came early. Perhaps people built places of ceremony before they became fully settled farmers. Perhaps the need to meet the unseen helped organize the visible world. You step closer to a pillar. Its surface is pale under the morning light, but its carved animals still carry a kind of alertness. A fox stretches along one side. Birds appear nearby. Serpents move in stone, though they have no warmth. Their bodies are stylized, not clumsy. Someone understood how to simplify life into symbol without draining it of force. The pillar is shaped like a standing presence. It almost resembles a person, though the face is missing. There are arms, hands, and a body suggested in stone. The effect is unsettling because it is incomplete. You recognize the human form, then lose it again. It stands between ancestor, god, marker, and memory. It does not explain which one it prefers. Ancient stone, rather annoyingly, is under no obligation to help modern people feel clever. The site does not need a roof to feel sacred. The sky is the roof. This matters for sacred astronomy. A place built for gathering under open heavens naturally becomes a place where celestial events can shape ritual. Even when direct astronomical alignment is debated, the surrounding sky remains part of the architecture. The rising sun, the moon's changing face, the seasonal stars, and the dark band of the night all enter the experience of those who stand there. The temple does not only occupy land, it occupies time. You imagine people approaching from different distances. Some come with baskets, some carry skins of water, some bring tools, pigments, animal parts, or stories collected along the way. Their sandals scrape stone. Their voices rise and fall in many accents, perhaps related, perhaps not. The gathering itself becomes a calendar event, tied to a season when travel is possible, food is available, or the heavens signal return. A sacred place pulls scattered people into one rhythm. Records from prehistoric archaeology show that feasting may have played a role at several early ceremonial centres. Animal bones, storage evidence, and signs of repeated gathering suggest that people came together for more than brief worship. They ate, worked, exchanged, remembered, and perhaps negotiated social bonds. The temple before temples may have been a feast hall, a memory house, a theatre of the sky, and a political experiment all at once. That sounds exhausting. It also sounds very human. A quirky tidbit from fringe discussions claims that Göbekli Tepe preserves extremely ancient star maps connected to a cosmic disaster. Some versions connect carved animals to constellations and propose that the stones record a comet impact. Mainstream scholars remain cautious because symbolic animals do not automatically become astronomical diagrams. Still, the idea has endured because the carvings seem to hover between earth and heaven. Even careful minds can feel the temptation. The better mystery is slower. Why would people invest such labour in carved stone before the familiar marks of later civilization appeared? Why create a ritual centre of such scale without kings, writing, or visible armies? The answer may be that sacred order itself was a form of power, a group that could gather people, feed them, direct labour, and interpret the sky already possessed something close to authority. No crown required. You move between pillars and notice how the space controls the body. You do not wander randomly. The stones guide your path, frame your view, and make you aware of your own smallness. A person standing within such an enclosure might feel watched, not by one figure, but by the whole arrangement. Animal carvings, upright stones, open sky, and gathered humans combine into a structure of attention. Temples begin by teaching people where to stand. The hidden timeline grows more complex here. Before writing, before state religion, before the great temple towers of Mesopotamia, there may have been places where sacred architecture emerged from repeated ceremony. The builders did not need written plans to create symbolic order. They needed memory, labour, leadership, and a shared sense that certain places touch the deeper pattern of the world. An open scholarly debate continues over how strongly early monumental sites should be linked to astronomy. Some researchers argue that their orientation, openness, and ritual character suggest skywatching played a meaningful role. Others emphasize social gathering, ancestor symbolism, animal power, and regional identity over precise celestial mapping. The disagreement is not a failure. It is the sound of scholars trying not to force a single explanation onto a place that may have held many. You stand still and let the wind move around you. The pillars cast short shadows now. Later, those shadows will lengthen and slide across the ground. At sunset, the whole enclosure will change character. By moonlight, it may become almost unearthly, each stone standing as a pale watcher in a darkened court. A ritual performed at noon would not be the same ritual under stars. Light edits, meaning perhaps this is what made such early sacred sites powerful. They were not finished objects. They changed with the sky. A carved serpent at midday is one thing. The same serpent under a cold moon is another. A pillar seen during midsummer heat carries a different breath than a pillar seen when winter wind cuts the hands. The heavens animated the stones without moving them. You realize that the first temples may not have been houses for gods in the later sense. They may have been meeting points between human time and cosmic time, places where seasonal gatherings, animal symbolism, death memory, and sky observation fused into something stronger than any one person could hold alone. A temple is a shared mind made visible. The zero civilization in this light becomes the shadow behind sacred architecture. It is not the fantasy of a vanished world capital, glittering conveniently beneath the sea. It is the older discipline by which humans learned to build places that organized fear, hunger, awe, and time. These were not cities, perhaps, but they carried the seed of cities. They did not write scriptures, perhaps, but they arranged landscape so that the heavens could be read by bodies. The sun climbs higher, heat begins to rise from stone, insects flicker in the grass beyond the enclosure. The carved animals remain still, but they feel less like decoration than witnesses. You understand that a place like this does not answer the mystery. It deepens it. Before temples had names, before priests had titles, before writing caught the sacred in lines, people were already building for forces larger than themselves. They gathered under the open sky, placed stone against time, and let the heavens enter through light, shadow, and season. And in that unfinished court of dust and silence, sacred architecture begins to breathe. You stand at the edge of the question itself, where certainty thins and the dark becomes unusually wide. The phrase zero civilization waits like a shape behind mist. It is tempting to give it towers, kings, sacred machines, and maps copied onto gold plates. Humans love a lost world. It is comforting, in a crooked little way, to imagine that someone once understood everything and then misplaced the instruction manual. But the stones do not ask for fantasy. They ask for patience. The zero civilization question begins more quietly. What if there was no single vanished empire? No grand capital swallowed by water? No forgotten academy of star priests ruling the Ice Age? What if the older truth is subtler? Across thousands of years, scattered communities may have shared a way of seeing the sky as order, memory, and command. Their tools were simple. Their attention was not. This is a different kind of lost civilization. Not a place, but a pattern. A mainstream fact helps steady the ground beneath you. Archaeologists confirm that long before written records, humans across many regions created symbolic objects, ritual landscapes, burial traditions, seasonal gathering sites, and long-distance exchange networks. Research discussed by scholars at Stanford with Yale and Oxford has shown that prehistoric people were capable of complex planning and shared symbolic life. This does not require hidden technology. It requires human minds given time, need, and community. You walk through a dry valley where old stones lie half buried in yellow grass. The sun is low, and the air smells of dust, warm flint, and crushed stems. Here, no inscription names a ruler. No carved boast declares victory over enemies. No list of taxes preserves the ordinary misery of administration, which, let us be honest, history has preserved with impressive enthusiasm. Instead, you find alignments, carvings, repeated forms, and places where people returned. Return is evidence of meaning. A civilization usually announces itself through cities, writing, hierarchy, storage, roads, and monuments. Yet before those things became fixed, there may have been loose systems of knowledge carried by migration, trade, marriage, initiation, and ritual. A tale of the winter sun could travel. A method for counting moons could travel. A star linked to animal movement could travel. A sacred direction could travel with the body long before a map could travel in a bag. The question is not whether a prehistoric world government mapped the stars. It almost certainly did not. The question is whether sky knowledge formed an invisible web among ancient communities. A web does not need one spider in the centre. It can be made from repeated needs and repeated discoveries. Every group sees the moon change. Every group feels winter and summer. Every group learns that dawn arrives in different places across the year. The sky teaches similar lessons to distant listeners. Still, similarity alone is not proof. An open, scholarly debate surrounds the spread of prehistoric ideas. Some researchers emphasize independent invention, arguing that different communities created similar monuments and calendars because all humans face similar natural cycles. Others emphasize contact, migration, and shared symbolic traditions moving across regions over long periods. The debate is careful because both forces can work together. The same sky shines over many lands. But people also carry stories when they move. You imagine a band of travellers crossing upland country. Their packs are light, but their memory is heavy. One person knows the moons for birthing season. Another knows where a bright star appears before cold winds. Another carries a song naming the eastern ridge, though that ridge now lies far behind them. When they reach new land, the old song does not fit perfectly. The horizon has changed, so the song changes too. Knowledge survives by bending. This may be how an unwritten sky system spreads across time, not as a rigid code, but as a family of practices. Watch the horizon, mark the moon, link animals to seasons, bury the dead toward light, gather when the sky turns, tell the children that the heavens remember what humans forget. Each community adapts the pattern to its own hills, rivers, herds, and fears. The zero civilization becomes visible only in fragments. A notch on bone, a chamber touched by sunrise, a circle of stones, a painted animal, a mound facing the return of light, a myth of first beings descending from heaven, a story of a flood beneath changing stars. Each fragment alone is uncertain. Together they form a mood, a pressure, a repeated human answer to the same enormous sky. A quirky tidbit clings to this subject like burrs on a cloak. Some fringe writers speak of a vanished mother culture that taught astronomy to the whole ancient world before disappearing without clear trace. The grand version is not accepted by mainstream archaeology because extraordinary claims require evidence that has not appeared. Yet the idea survives because it dramatizes a genuine puzzle. How did people without writing preserve such complex knowledge for so long? The answer may be less glamorous and more impressive. They practiced. They repeated. They trained memory as a living craft. In oral cultures, memory can become astonishingly precise. Genealogies, navigation routes, ritual sequences, legal customs, and seasonal knowledge can pass through many generations when society depends on them. The modern mind, softened by calendars and glowing reminders, sometimes forgets what memory can do when forgetting has consequences. You feel the wind lift grit against your skin. The valley narrows ahead, and the evening star begins to glow above a dark shoulder of land. One traveller points to it. Another nods. Perhaps they know it by a name that will never survive. Perhaps it marks a season, a direction, a story of birth, a warning, or simply beauty. The meaning is gone, but the gesture remains imaginable. A pointed finger can be the first line of a map. In this older world, sacred astronomy does not separate knowledge from belonging. To know the sky is to belong to a people who taught you what to notice. A child learns not merely that a star rises, but why anyone cares. They learn which nights require silence, which moons permit travel, which dawns belong to the dead, which lights foretell gathering. The sky becomes social. This is important. A star by itself is distant. A star named within a story becomes intimate. A star tied to duty becomes powerful. A star observed by many generations becomes ancestral. The zero civilization. Then, maybe the civilization of shared attention before shared writing. No tablets, no archives, no royal seal. Only the repeated act of looking up together. The hidden timeline stretches behind you now. Not as a straight road, but as overlapping circles. Hunter-gatherers become seasonal builders. Seasonal builders become ritual communities. Ritual communities become early villages. Early villages become temple towns. Temple towns become cities with scribes. Somewhere along that long path, the sky knowledge does not vanish. It is absorbed, renamed, formalized, and sometimes claimed by kings. The old watcher becomes the priest. The horizon mark becomes the temple axis. The moon count becomes the calendar of offerings. The animal in the stars becomes a divine emblem. You turn once more toward the darkening valley. The first stars gather, faint at the edges, stronger overhead. Nothing about them proves a lost empire. Nothing about them closes the debate. Yet they reveal a deeper possibility. Before history was written, human beings may have already built a civilization of the mind, one made from rhythm, memory, and the sacred repetition of the heavens. Perhaps that is why the question refuses to sleep. It is not asking whether a forgotten city ruled the world. It is asking whether civilization began earlier than our documents can see, in the silent agreement between eyes, stars, stones, seasons, and stories, and under the evening sky. That possibility feels less like a claim than a door left slightly open. You enter a field of pillars at dusk, when stone begins to look less like matter and more like memory. The last light leans across the ground in long strips of bronze. Dust hangs low, stirred by feet that have walked here all day. The air smells of dry grass, warmed rock, and the faint smoke of a fire beginning somewhere beyond the enclosure. The pillars do not seem asleep. They stand in ordered stillness, taller than the people moving between them. Their surfaces hold carvings, shallow cuts, animal forms, and strange signs that refuse to become simple decoration. Each mark carries the feeling of an old decision. Someone chose its place. Someone struck the stone. Someone stepped back and saw more than a surface. You move closer. The stone is cool now. A mainstream fact gives weight to this scene. At several prehistoric ceremonial sites, including the great pillar enclosures of southeastern Anatolia, archaeologists have documented carved animals, repeated symbols, and deliberate architectural arrangements dating to a time before widespread writing. Research teams linked with major universities and scientific institutes have argued that these monuments reveal organized labor, ritual purpose, and complex symbolic communication. They do not speak in sentences, yet they speak. The question is what kind of speech they preserve. A pillar is not only a post, it is a vertical line connecting ground and sky. It rises from the earth, crosses the level of human eyes, and points toward the changing heavens. In many later traditions, upright stones, poles, trees, mountains, and temple towers become images of cosmic order. They mark the place where above and below seem to touch. Here, long before formal cosmic diagrams appear, you sense the same instinct. The pillar says, this is the centre. Not the only centre, perhaps. Ancient worlds could hold many centres without embarrassment. Each sacred place became a small axis around which a local cosmos turned. Stand beside the pillar, and the horizon becomes arranged around you. The sky feels less like emptiness, and more like a dome set above a chosen point. You trace a carved serpent with your eyes. Its body flows downward along the stone, not fully natural, not fully abstract. Nearby, a bird spreads itself in profile. A fox leans forward with alert confidence. These creatures may belong to myth, season, clan identity, danger, or memory. They may also be part of a larger structure through which people organize time and place. No single meaning is necessary. That is what makes old symbols powerful. Modern minds often ask for translation as if symbols were tiny locked boxes with one word inside. The prehistoric maker may have worked differently. A serpent could mean earth, renewal, danger, water, death, healing, or a path between worlds. A bird could mean sky, message, migration, soul, dawn, or seasonal return. A fox could mean cunning, night, boundary crossing, or a family sign, meaning layers like sediment. One carving can carry several worlds. The quirky tidbit here comes from the more daring interpretations of carved pillars, where some enthusiasts argue that animal symbols form a complete ancient zodiac. They match creatures on stones to later star signs and propose a forgotten system reaching deep into prehistory. Most scholars respond with caution, because later constellations cannot simply be projected backward without evidence. Still, the idea persists because the carvings do feel arranged, as if a hidden order waits behind them. The danger is forcing the pattern. The wonder is that pattern exists at all. You step between two pillars and notice how your body becomes part of the arrangement. The stones frame your sightline. One gap opens toward a pale strip of horizon. Another encloses the darkening sky above. If people gathered here at specific times, the pillars may have worked as more than sculptures. They may have directed attention, controlled movement, and turned ordinary looking into ritual seeing. That difference matters. Everyone can look at a sunrise. A sacred structure teaches you how to see it. It says, stand here, wait here, face this way, notice this edge, remember this sign. The sky event becomes part of an enacted pattern. People are not merely observers. They are participants inside a machine made of stone, story, and expectation. A council decree from a much later age can prove how official temples regulated calendars, festivals, and offerings. But prehistoric pillars show the earlier possibility in raw form. Before written authority, communities could still organize sacred time through repeated actions at fixed places. The structure itself held instructions. The body learned them by returning. An open scholarly debate continues over whether pillar arrangements at early ritual sites encode astronomical observations, social myths, ancestor cults, or combinations of all three. Some researchers emphasize the role of animal symbolism and communal feasting. Others examine orientation, visibility, and possible celestial references. A careful reading does not need to choose one answer too quickly, because ritual architecture often works by joining many forms of knowledge. The pillar can be a calendar. It can be a witness. It can be a body. It can be a boundary between the known and the frighteningly large. You stand in the center of the enclosure as twilight thickens. Shadows pool at the pillar bases. The carved animals lose detail first, then return when firelight flickers from the side. Suddenly the stone fox seems to move. The serpent seems wetter, more alive. The bird's beak catches a spark of orange light. The place changes not because the stones change, but because light changes their behavior. This is sacred technology, though not in the modern noisy sense. It is the technology of attention. Such places may have taught people that order exists beyond ordinary sight. During the day, the carvings are visible. At night, they emerge and vanish. At the solstice, a shadow might fall differently. Under a full moon, pale figures may brighten. At certain seasons, a star may rise behind a chosen marker. Whether every effect was planned is uncertain, but the experience would have been real. You can feel how ritual might grow from it. People gather, fires are lit, food is shared, elders speak, the pillars stand like silent persons around the group. Above them stars turn in the dark. The carvings seem to repeat the creatures of land, air, and underworld. The community stands at the crossing point, surrounded by a carved cosmos. In that moment, order becomes visible. Perhaps this is the system hidden in the pillars, not a written doctrine, not a formal star atlas, but a structure of relationships, earth below, sky above, animals between, humans gathered at the center, time moving through light, moon, season, shadow, and story. The system does not need alphabetic labels. It is taught through placement. You know where to stand. You know when to gather. You know which creature marks the threshold. You know that the heavens are watching, or at least that everyone behaves as though they are. The zero civilization takes on the shape of these pillars. It becomes an early architecture of cosmic order, made before people wrote down the rules. A pillar can outlive a voice, but it still depends on memory. Without the story, the stone becomes mute. Without the stone, the story drifts. Together, they hold longer than either could alone. The sky is darker now, and the first stars appear above the upright forms. They do not line themselves into easy answers. They glimmer, patient and remote, while the carved animals keep their faces turned outward. You stand among them, feeling the old arrangement settle around you, ground, stone, body, creature, horizon, star. It is not a map in the modern sense. It is a world arranged so that mapping can begin, and in the hush between the pillars, you sense how ancient people may have reconstructed the universe from vertical lines, carved signs, and the slow turning of the night above them. You lie on your back beneath a sky that appears perfectly still, because human life is brief and the heavens are polite enough to hide their larger movements. The grass beneath you is cool and slightly damp. A beetle moves against your sleeve, then disappears into the dark. Above, the stars hold their positions with such calm authority that it seems almost rude to doubt them. Yet the sky is not fixed. It only moves too slowly for ordinary fear to notice. The great turning is almost invisible. Night by night, year by year, the stars return in familiar patterns. A child sees the same bright forms an elder once named. A hunter finds the same rising point. A ritual watcher waits for a familiar star before dawn. Everything seems stable enough for memory, and that stability is what allows sacred astronomy to grow. But beneath the repeated pattern, another motion is happening. It is slow beyond comfort. A mainstream fact can be placed gently here. Modern astronomy confirms that Earth's rotational axis slowly wobbles, causing the positions of stars at key seasonal moments to shift over long periods. This motion is known as axial precession, and one full cycle takes roughly 26,000 years. Ancient Greek astronomers later described this effect in mathematical terms, but the motion itself was always present above prehistoric eyes. You do not need the modern term to feel the mystery. Imagine a bright star rising before dawn at a certain season. For many generations, it appears close enough to the same place to be useful. A story grows around it. A ceremony follows it. A stone marker may frame it. Then, across centuries, the star drifts slightly against the calendar. The change is subtle, almost insulting in its patience. No single watcher sees the full story, unless records or traditions reach across an astonishing length of time. That is where the whisper begins. Could prehistoric people have noticed such slow celestial drift? Some claims say yes with great confidence, which is always when one should lean back and sip the tea carefully. Mainstream scholars remain cautious. To recognize precession requires either long continuous records, accurate comparison across generations, or a framework that preserves observations for centuries. That is a demanding requirement for societies without writing. Demanding does not mean impossible in every form. It may mean that only fragments were noticed. A star no longer rises exactly where the oldest story says it should. A seasonal sign seems late. A sacred alignment loses its force. An elder remembers what an elder before them claimed. The community adjusts the tale, moves the marker, or accepts the drift as part of a deeper cosmic unease. Long memory can become a net, though many small fish slip through it. You watch the northern sky. Stars circle slowly around a point that seems almost still, yet even that centre changes across vast time. Today, a familiar polar star holds the place of honour, but in other eras, different stars came nearer the pole. The sacred north is not eternally fixed. The cosmic centre itself wanders, slowly and silently, like a king changing thrones while everyone sleeps. That thought is unsettling in the gentlest possible way. For ancient observers, the sky may have seemed like the model of permanence. Mountains fall, rivers shift, bodies die, but the stars return. If some deep tradition noticed that even the stars change their seasonal stations, the discovery would be profound. The heavens would still be ordered, but their order would be larger than the human calendar. Time would not be a circle only. It would be a spiral too wide to see. A quirky fringe tidbit lives here with unusual confidence. Some alternative writers argue that prehistoric monuments encode knowledge of precession thousands of years before classical astronomy. They connect star ages, animal symbols, and monument alignments into long cosmic calendars. Most professional archaeologists consider many of these claims unproven, especially when the evidence depends on flexible symbolic matching. Still, the fascination is understandable. Precession feels like exactly the kind of secret an ancient stone would keep. You can almost hear it breathing under the dates. An open scholarly debate continues over whether very ancient societies could preserve observations of slow stellar drift through oral tradition, monument renewal, or repeated horizon watching. Some researchers allow that long-term sky watching may have revealed gradual changes in limited ways. Others argue that claims of prehistoric precessional knowledge exceed the available evidence. The debate remains alive because the sky preserves motion better than the ground preserves explanation. You sit beside a circle of watchers in your imagination. They are not mathematicians in the later sense, they are keepers of ceremony. Each winter, they gather near a horizon marker. Each spring, they compare the first rising of a star with a notch, a stone, a ridge. They do not speak of degrees, they speak of lateness, absence, return, and correction. Their vocabulary belongs to ritual, but their attention is exact. A star can be late only if someone expects it. This is the heart of the precession whisper. Not proof of a global lost academy, not secret equations chiselled into every suspiciously aligned rock, but the possibility that long watching created awareness of deep time. The sky may have taught prehistoric people that some cycles are longer than dynasties, longer than forests, longer than the memory of any one family. Such knowledge would not make life easier. It might make life stranger. If the heavens change, then tradition must carry both trust and flexibility. A sacred story might say the great bird rises when the cold breaks. Generations later, the timing shifts. Does the bird lose power? Does the story change? Does a new star receive the old name? These are not merely technical questions. They touch authority, ritual, and the right to interpret the sky. The keeper of stars becomes important because the sky is difficult. You feel the night deepen around you. The air smells of wet grass and distant smoke. Somewhere, a dog or wolf gives a low call, then silence closes again. Above, one bright star seems fixed in place, though you now know that fixed is a mercy of short lives. Nothing overhead is truly still. The earth spins. The earth circles the sun. The axis nods. The stars themselves move through space, each carrying its own ancient journey. Stillness is a human interpretation. Perhaps that is why precession matters so much to the imagination of sacred astronomy. It reveals that even the oldest maps expire. A monument aligned to a star can become a monument to absence. A calendar built on a celestial sign can become a memory of misalignment. The sacred does not vanish, but it changes tone. What once pointed clearly begins to point toward the past. That may be the true hidden timeline, not a list of lost kings, but a record of shifting skies. The zero civilization, if it existed as a web of sacred attention, would have lived under different stars than ours. Its watchers may have known dawns we cannot see in the same way. Their north was not always our north. Their seasonal signs may have risen from places now empty. When you look upward, you're not seeing exactly what they saw. The sky is age, and yet the act remains. You lie beneath the turning dark as they may have lain. You look for order as they may have looked. You wonder whether a pattern is real or only desired, and that question itself feels ancient. The stars continue their slow displacement, indifferent to certainty. They grant enough repetition for memory, enough change for mystery, and enough distance for humility. Perhaps long before recorded history, someone noticed that the heavens were keeping more than one kind of time. The familiar year returned, the moon circled, the seasons breathed, but behind them, a deeper wheel moved almost without sound, and in that nearly silent motion, sacred astronomy discovered the oldest unsettling truth, that even eternity has a rhythm. You walk toward a shoreline that is no longer where it once was. The sea lies calm tonight, dark as polished stone, but the land under your feet has a drowned memory. Far beyond the present surf, old valleys sleep beneath the water, ancient river mouths, campsites, forests, and walking paths have been covered by the slow rise of seas since the last ice age faded from the world. The tide breathes in. The past disappears again. Salt hangs in the air with a cold metallic taste. Foam moves over black pebbles, then slips away with a soft hiss. Overhead, the stars scatter across the sky, sharp and unreachable. Their reflections tremble on the moving water. You begin to understand why so many old stories place memory at the edge of flood, darkness, and heaven. A mainstream fact rests beneath the sound of waves. Geological research confirms that sea levels rose dramatically after the last glacial maximum, flooding coastal plains across many parts of the world. Studies discussed by major research institutions, including Columbia, Oxford, and leading earth science journals, show that landscapes once inhabited by humans now lie under shallow seas. This does not prove every flood legend preserves a specific event, but it gives the human imagination a very real wound to remember. People lost land. Not metaphorically, physically. A valley where families walked could become marsh, then inlet, then sea floor. A hunting ground could vanish under brackish water. A sacred hill might become an island. A burial place might be swallowed by the tide. Generations watching this would not speak of sea level curves. They would speak of waters rising, ancestors displaced, and the old country gone. That is how flood memory begins. You stand near a fire built above the tide line. Around it, people watch the dark water with unease. The elders tell of land beyond the waves, a place where trees once stood and animals crossed freely. Children listen with the polite suspicion children reserve for impossible adult claims. Land under the sea sounds ridiculous until a storm uncovers old stumps in the mud. Then everyone becomes quiet. The sky enters these memories because the sky orders time when Earth becomes unreliable. If the coast moves, the stars still return. If the river mouth is drowned, the moon still fattens and shrinks. If a village must retreat inland, the familiar lights above help carry identity across loss. Star memory becomes a portable homeland. You can lose a shore. You can still keep a constellation. Many cultures later imagine great floods, vanished ages, or worlds drowned because divine order was broken. Those stories belong to particular societies and must not be flattened into one easy explanation. Still, the recurrence of flood themes is striking. Water destroys boundaries, it erases footprints, it takes fields, homes, bones, and shrines without asking permission. Which is frankly poor manners from an otherwise elegant element. A quirky fringe tidbit appears whenever drowned landscapes are discussed. Some enthusiasts point to submerged stone formations and claim they are ruins of a lost prehistoric civilization. Occasionally, underwater archaeology does reveal real ancient sites on drowned shelves, which keeps the excitement alive. Yet many dramatic claims fail under careful geological study. Nature can make shapes that look suspiciously architectural, rather like a bored artist teasing human pattern hunger. Still, the ocean does hide real history. That is the unsettling part. An open scholarly debate continues over how much ancient flood mythology may preserve memories of post-glacial sea level rise, local catastrophes, river floods, or symbolic ideas of cosmic renewal. Some researchers see echoes of real environmental trauma in oral traditions. Others warn that flood stories also express moral, ritual, and theological themes not reducible to geology. The debate remains delicate because memory, myth, and landscape change do not separate cleanly. You listen to the waves and understand why they would not. In sacred astronomy, flood memory and star memory may meet through cycles. Water rises and falls, the moon draws tides, seasons bring rains, certain stars appear when storms are near or when travel by sea becomes safe. A community living along coasts or rivers would learn that heaven and water converse constantly. The moon pulls brightness over wet sand. Stars guide boats. Clouds hide danger. Dawn reveals what night has taken. A flood is chaos. A calendar's reply, imagine a people forced to move again and again as the shoreline changes. They carry baskets, children, embers, tools, stories, and the dead when they can. They leave behind places that once held names. At the new camp, the horizon is unfamiliar. The old sunrise notch is gone. The old moonrise over the river bend no longer works. They must learn the sky again from a changed earth. This is more than navigation, it is grief. The zero civilization seen through drowned landscapes becomes a civilization of survivors, not necessarily survivors of one sudden world ending, but of many slow endings. Ice retreats, seas rise, rivers shift, grasslands change, animal paths vanish. Human groups adapt, remember, and reinterpret. Their sacred astronomy may have preserved not only timing, but continuity during displacement. The stars made loss bearable because they seemed to remain. You look at the sea and picture an old coastal plain beneath it. Perhaps there were fires there once, and people watched the same band of stars while repairing nets or scraping hides. Perhaps children slept beside dogs, while elders named lights over a horizon that no longer exists. Perhaps a sacred marker stood there, now covered by silt and fish shadow. Not a palace, not a golden temple, a place of meaning, lost without announcement. That kind of loss leaves stories. Some flood traditions speak of a small remnant preserved while a wider world is drowned. Others describe warnings ignored, boats built, mountains reached, or new beginnings under a cleansed sky. Even when shaped by later religion, such narratives may carry older emotional truths. Water can end a known world. Survival requires memory. The sky witnesses the transition. You notice how the moon lifts above the sea. Its path lays a trembling silver road across the water. The image feels ancient enough to have generated 1,000 myths. A road that cannot be walked. A bridge that breaks as it forms. A path for souls. Gods, ancestors, or the last lights of a drowned land. No wonder people watched. Lunar tides would have made the connection visible. Coastal communities could see the sea respond to the moon's rhythm, though their explanations would differ from modern physics. The important thing is observation. The moon changes shape, and the water changes reach. A sacred relationship suggests itself. The sky is not distant from the shore. It touches it nightly. You sit on a stone above the surf. It is slick with salt, cold through your clothing. The waves drag pebbles back with a rattling sound like whispered counting. Every wave repeats the gesture of erasure, then withdrawal. Erase, withdraw, erase, withdraw. It is a calendar made of loss. The hidden timeline now includes drowned coasts and remembered skies. Long before written history, people may have used celestial order to survive environmental change. They watched stars to move, moons to gather, seasons to rebuild, and tides to understand the restless border between land and sea. Their myths may not be records in the modern sense, but they may hold emotional fossils of real transformations. That phrase is strange, but useful. An emotional fossil is not a bone. It is a fear preserved in story. It is a remembered instruction disguised as wonder. Stay above the waterline. Honor the moon. Listen to the old warnings. The sea has been here before. It can come again. The fire burns lower behind you. The stars remain clear above the black water. Somewhere under the waves, old ground lies silent, holding whatever human traces survived the long drowning. The sea keeps them without explanation. The sky continues to turn, carrying the only map that could cross the flood unchanged. Perhaps this is why ancient people bound catastrophe to the heavens. When the earth betrayed its borders, the stars still offered pattern. When the shore vanished, the sky remained a shelter of returning signs. And beneath the calm sound of water, you feel that some of the oldest star maps may have been drawn by people walking away from a world the sea had already begun to remember for them. You enter the hour when most people sleep, but one figure remains awake beside the dying fire. The camp is quiet. Children lie curled under skins. Dogs twitch in dreams. The embers breathe a dull red glow, and smoke lifts in a thin column before the wind takes it apart. Beyond the last shelter, the sky opens in terrible beauty. One person watches. He's not yet a priest in the later temple sense. No stone tower belongs to him. No written hymn rests beside his hand. No king has stamped his authority onto clay and sent it across the land. Yet the others look toward him when the moon changes, when storms gather, when a child is born under a strange light, when the season seems uncertain. He keeps the sky. That is power. Mainstream anthropology and archaeology confirm that many non-literate societies maintain specialized knowledge through elders, ritual experts, navigators, healers, and ceremonial leaders. Scholars connected with institutions such as Yale, Harvard, and the University of California have studied how oral cultures preserve complex information through story, performance, place memory, and repeated practice. These studies do not allow us to copy living cultures backward into prehistory, but they reveal what human memory can achieve without writing. A specialist does not need a book. He needs training, attention, and social trust. You watch him seated on a flat stone, wrapped against the cold. His hair is grey, or perhaps it only looks grey in starlight. A cord with small bones hangs near his chest. Beside him lies a staff notched with marks, darkened by oil from many hands. He looks upward more often than he looks at the fire. The night has become his text, and the horizon is his margin. Around him, ordinary life depends on timing. When to move camp, when to expect herds, when to avoid a flooded crossing, when to gather for ceremony, when to prepare for frost, in a world where timing can mean hunger or survival. The person who remembers the heavens becomes more than a storyteller. He becomes a keeper of risk. That is a serious occupation, and probably an annoying one because people blame the keeper when weather misbehaves. The sacred astronomer before writing may have worked through memory systems that were both practical and ritual. A star rising before dawn might signal a seasonal change. A certain moon might mark when women gather plants, when hunters travel, or when the dead receive offerings. A repeated ceremony could help the whole group remember the count. The ritual does not decorate the calendar, it protects it. In such a world, knowledge is rarely naked. It wears feathers, songs, scars, taboos, jokes, food rules, and stories about beings who punish forgetfulness. That may sound irrational from a modern desk, but it is excellent design. A rule wrapped in sacred fear is harder to ignore. A date tied to a feast is easier to remember. A star linked to an ancestor becomes emotionally permanent. Memory needs hooks. Your mind drifts toward the watcher's training. He may have learned as a child, taken aside before dawn while others slept. Someone showed him where a star first rose behind a dark hill. Someone taught him the sequence of moons between cold and warmth. Someone corrected him gently, or not gently at all, when he confused one seasonal sign with another. Knowledge entered the body through repetition. He learned by losing sleep. That sounds fair. The stars also keep difficult hours. A mainstream historical fact from later ancient societies shows how this pattern eventually becomes institutional. In Mesopotamia, temple scholars carefully observed celestial events, omens, and calendars, recording them on clay tablets. That written tradition belongs to a much later world, but it reveals an important continuity. Sky watching and sacred authority could become closely linked. The roots of that relationship may reach back into oral time. When the watcher's memory served the role later carried by archives, the old keeper speaks in a low voice. You cannot understand his words, but you understand the scene. A young apprentice sits nearby, trying not to shiver. The elder points toward 3 bright stars low in the west. He touches the notches on the staff. He pauses, then points toward the moon's path. The apprentice follows with wide eyes, afraid to miss what cannot be repeated until the next turning. This is not entertainment, it is inheritance. A quirky tidbit often appears in stories about early star priests. Some fringe writers imagine secret brotherhoods preserving astronomical wisdom for tens of thousands of years, guarding formulas through initiations and hidden symbols. The evidence for such organized brotherhoods in deep prehistory is not there. Yet the idea exaggerates something plausible. Certain people probably did guard special knowledge, because not every detail of timing, ritual, and celestial interpretation would belong equally to everyone. Secrecy gives knowledge weight. A ceremony known to all creates unity. A rule known only to a few creates authority. The keeper of stars may stand between those two forces, sharing enough to guide the community, hiding enough to remain necessary. That arrangement is as old as human politics, and just about as tidy as a basket full of startled snakes. An open scholarly debate continues over when specialized ritual authority first emerged in prehistoric societies. Some researchers see early monumental sites and rich burials as signs of developing hierarchy. Others argue that ritual leadership could exist without permanent ranks or formal priesthoods. The debate matters because the Sky Watcher may not have been a ruler. He may have been respected, feared, mocked, consulted, and ignored in equal measure. Depending on whether the prediction worked, you feel a smile almost rise at that. Ancient life was sacred. Yes, but also social. Someone surely whispered that the old man always made the cold sound mysterious. Someone else probably defended him because he remembered the year of the Great Hunger. Authority is never pure. It breathes through human relationships, suspicion, gratitude, dependence, and memory. The Watcher lifts ash from the fire and lets it fall from his fingers. Perhaps he's marking wind direction. Perhaps he's making an offering. Perhaps he simply enjoys dramatic gestures, which ritual specialists are allowed in moderation. The ash drifts sideways. Above it, the stars remain untouched. He looks not only at the sky, but at the people who sleep beneath it. That is the heart of his role. He must translate distance into guidance. The stars are far away, indifferent and cold. The community is close, fragile and hungry. Between them sits a human being, turning light into instruction. Priests before writing may have been translators of pattern. They did not invent the stars, they arranged human behaviour around them. They told people when to gather, when to refrain, when to mourn, when to plant trust in the returning season. They transformed observation into obligation. That transformation is one of the quiet beginnings of religion, governance, and science together. Before those words drifted into separate rooms and pretended not to know each other, you breathe in the cold air. The fire has nearly collapsed into ash. The apprentice nods slowly, fighting sleep. The elder continues speaking, because some lessons can only be given under the actual sky. A star name learned indoors has less force. A moon count learned without moonlight has no teeth. The Zero civilization appears here as a lineage of watchers, not a palace archive, but a chain of remembered nights. One keeper teaches another, a staff is passed on, a song is changed to fit a new horizon. A dangerous season is avoided because someone remembered the star that warned of it. The civilization survives not in buildings, but in trained attention. That may be why it leaves such faint traces. A priest without writing dies, and much dies with him. Yet some knowledge escapes death by entering ceremony, architecture, myth, and the habits of a people. The Watcher's voice fades, but the community still rises before dawn on the right day. His name is forgotten, but the stone remains aligned. His body returns to soil, but the moon count continues in another hand. The night grows colder. The elder finally lowers his gaze. For a moment, he seems smaller, only a tired human wrapped in skins. Then he points once more to the sky, and the apprentice follows. The gesture is simple, but it crosses generations. You understand that sacred astronomy required more than stars. It required people willing to stay awake, to remember, to teach, and to carry uncertainty with a calm face. In that fragile office, before any temple ledger or royal calendar, the first keepers of heaven turned silence into guidance. And while the camp sleeps, the old Watcher listens to the sky as if it might still speak his name. You turn your face toward the northern dark, where the stars appear to wheel around an invisible nail. The night is very clear now. Cold air presses gently against your cheeks, and each breath leaves you with the taste of stone, smoke, and distant frost. Above the low line of hills, the heavens seem to rotate with solemn discipline, as if the sky has found a centre and refuses to abandon it. The centre barely moves. That is what the eye believes. You watch the stars circle through the hours. Some rise in the east and vanish in the west, travelling like bright animals across the black field. Others remain always near the north, turning in patient arcs around a quiet point. To people without written charts, this difference would matter. The northern sky offers a pattern unlike the wandering moon or the travelling sun. It suggests stillness surrounded by motion. That kind of stillness becomes sacred very easily. A mainstream historical fact gives shape to the idea. Many ancient cultures later treated the northern region of the sky as a place of stability, order, kingship, immortality, or divine nearness. Egyptian pyramid texts, Mesopotamian traditions, and later classical sources reveal the long importance of circumpolar stars. Scholars at institutions such as Oxford, Yale, and the Oriental Institute have studied how these stars could become symbols of permanence because they never set below the horizon in certain latitudes. They stay visible. That is their power. You stand beside a low mound where the grass is silvered by moonlight. A few stones mark its edge. The people who made it may not have known the later names of the stars, and they certainly did not speak in modern astronomical terms. Yet they could watch the turning. They could notice which lights never disappeared. They could imagine those deathless stars as ancestors, guardians, or a region beyond decay. In a world where everything dies, a star that never sets feels different. You can understand the emotional force. Fire goes out, bodies cool, rivers flood, children grow away from the arms that held them. Even mountains lose stones to frost and rain. But in the north, certain lights return night after night, circling without sinking. They seem exempt from the ordinary law of disappearance. Ancient people may have looked at them and seen a promise, or at least a beautiful refusal. The sacred north is not merely direction, it is a spiritual behaviour of the sky. A quirky tidbit comes from the strange history of pole stars themselves. The bright star that seems northern now was not always the closest guide to the celestial pole, and it will not keep that role forever. In deep antiquity, other stars held the place more closely. This gives fringe writers plenty of room for dramatic claims about lost polar cults and forgotten cosmic thrones. Most of those claims outrun the evidence with admirable athleticism. Still, the underlying fact is real. The sky's centre changes over vast time? That makes sacred north even more mysterious. The place of stillness is not perfectly still. You imagine an ancient watcher lying beside a dying fire, studying the circular paths overhead. With no compass, the sky itself teaches orientation. The northern turning gives direction by night. It can guide travel, settlement, hunting, and ritual space. A people who learn the northern sky gain a stable reference in a moving world. Direction becomes not only practical, but sacredly ordered. To know north is to know where you stand. You walk slowly around the mound, and your footsteps make a soft rhythm in the grass. The stones seem arranged with care, though not enough remains to know their exact intention. One small gap opens toward the northern horizon. Perhaps it is nothing. Perhaps it once framed a star. Perhaps someone stood here during a burial and looked toward the region that never sank. The thought is not proof, but it is powerful. Death seeks direction. Later civilizations often oriented tombs, temples, and sacred ways according to cosmic principles. That fact does not let us assign every prehistoric burial a precise astronomical meaning. Yet it reminds you that human beings have long refused to place the dead randomly. A body's direction can express hope, fear, identity, ancestry, or cosmology. The dead are laid down inside an idea of the universe. An open scholarly debate remains over how early the northern sky gained formal symbolic importance. Some researchers argue that consistent orientation patterns in burials and monuments suggest cosmological thinking deep in prehistory. Others warn that practical local, or social reasons may explain many alignments. The careful answer may be that different places held different meanings, and that direction could be both practical and sacred at once. The past rarely respects single explanations. You look again at the rotating stars. Slowly, the pattern begins to feel like a wheel, not a wheel of wood, but a wheel of light turning around an unseen hub. Many later cultures would imagine cosmic axes, world trees, sacred mountains, or central pillars linking earth to heaven. Perhaps the nightly turning of the northern sky helped nourish such images. Above you is a wheel. Below you, a pillar or mountain can answer it. A vertical world forms in thought. The sky turns above. The earth holds below. Between them stands the human body, looking shivering, wondering why the night feels so arranged. Sacred astronomy is born from that sensation. The cosmos is not chaos. Something holds. Something turns. Something returns. Perhaps the oldest cosmic centre was not a building, but a direction. You imagine a ritual gathering during the longest winter nights. The moon is absent, and the dark is deep enough to make every star fierce. People stand around a fire, their faces orange on one side and black on the other. An elder points north, naming the lights that never descend. The community listens. The dead are spoken of. The ancestors are not placed in the west, where the sun dies, but near the turning centre, where stars endure. It is possible, not certain, but possible enough to remain with you. The sacred north also teaches hierarchy. The wandering bodies move across the heavens, yet the turning centre appears to command them without moving. This image can easily become political. Later kings and priests often borrowed the language of celestial order, presenting themselves as stable centres around which society should turn. One suspects the stars did not authorize all of this personally, but rulers have always enjoyed a useful metaphor when it shines. Still, before kings, the northern sky may have offered a model of the order without human authority. It needed no throne. It simply turned. You feel the ground grow colder beneath your feet. Frost begins to gather on the grass. The stars near the north continue their circular motion, slow enough to require patience, clear enough to reward it. A person who watches for 1 hour sees a slight change. A person who watches through the night sees the wheel. A community that watches across generations builds a cosmology. This is how the Zero civilization may have mapped the heavens, not with inked lines, but with repeated posture, facing east for dawn, facing north for permanence, facing the moon for counting, facing the Milky Band for the path of souls. Each direction becomes part of a sacred grammar, spoken by bodies in space. The northern sky may have been the grammar of stillness. It tells you that some things move, and some things seem to anchor movement. It tells you that the world can be navigated, even at night. It tells you that above the confusion of weather and hunger, there is a turning pattern that does not need human permission. That knowledge can calm a people. It can also humble them. You stand under the revolving dark, and the silence feels less empty than ordered. The unseen centre remains hidden, yet everything nearby curves around it. The stars do not explain themselves, but their movement teaches a lesson older than writing. Stability may not be absence of motion. It may be the secret around which motion gathers. And as the northern lights of the ancient sky continue circling, you sense why prehistoric watchers may have lifted their eyes toward that quiet region and imagined a doorway, a throne, a pillar, or a home for those who had passed beyond the horizon of the living. You stand where the night tide reaches the stones, and the moon hangs low above the water like a pale bowl of milk. The shore is quiet, but never still. Water slips forward, touches the rocks, and slides away again with a soft dragging sound. Small pools tremble under silver light. Seaweed moves like dark hair in the shallows. The air smells of salt, wet shells, and cold sand. The moon is not distant here. It has entered everything. It brightens the backs of waves. It lays a path across the sea that breaks as soon as your eyes follow it. It turns ordinary stones into offerings. It gathers shadows under your feet and makes the world feel half awake, half dreaming. You understand why ancient people gave the moon such weight. Unlike the sun, it changes visibly, almost emotionally. It grows, disappears, returns, and seems to carry a wound that heals every month. That rhythm is impossible to ignore. A mainstream fact steadies the scene. Modern science confirms that the moon plays a central role in Earth's tides through gravitational attraction, while its phases shape nocturnal light across the month. Archaeologists and anthropologists from institutions such as Stanford, Yale, and the University of California have studied how lunar cycles influence ritual, travel, fishing, gathering, and social timing in many cultures. The moon is not merely beautiful, it alters human opportunity. A full moon can extend the working night. A dark moon can conceal movement. A spring tide can expose shellfish beds or flood low ground. A certain moon may signal when fish gather, when birds nest, when plants can be harvested, or when a journey becomes safer. Sacred astronomy begins wherever the sky affects the body. Here, the body matters. You place one hand against your chest and feel your own pulse. It is small compared with the tide, but it belongs to the same world of cycles. Ancient people noticed patterns in bleeding, pregnancy, birth, sickness, desire, sleep, and mood. They connected human life to lunar change because the resemblance seemed too intimate to dismiss. Not every connection was biologically exact, but exactness is not the only force that shapes belief. The moon made time feel embodied. You imagine a group gathered along an estuary. Women sit near baskets of shellfish. Children carry reeds. Men repair nets under a light strong enough to work by, though everything looks washed and strange. An elder watches the waterline creep higher against a familiar stone. Another counts nights since the moon first appeared as a thin curve. Their knowledge is practical, but the atmosphere is reverent. The tide comes in like a visitor who knows the house. In such places, the moon becomes a teacher of return and risk. Too low a tide and a boat cannot pass. Too high a tide and a crossing vanishes. A moonlit night may help a traveller find the path, but it may also reveal them to enemies or predators. Every blessing has teeth. Ancient people understood that rather well. A quirky tidbit from the margins of interpretation suggests that some prehistoric cup-marked stones may have held water to mirror the moon, or stars during rituals. The idea is difficult to prove, and many cup marks may have served other symbolic or practical purposes. Still, it has a quiet elegance. A small hollow filled by rain becomes a sky held in stone. A moon above finds a second moon below. Perhaps the ritual did not require certainty. Perhaps reflection itself was enough. You kneel near a shallow pool and look into it. The moon trembles there, broken by a ripple from one falling drop. For a moment, the sky seems reachable. Then the image dissolves. That little vanishing could become a whole theology if repeated long enough under the right night. What is reflected can disappear. What disappears can return. What returns may not be the same, yet it is recognized. The moon teaches identity through change. Mainstream archaeology confirms that lunar reckoning appears in many ancient calendar systems after writing emerges, especially in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and later Mediterranean societies. These written calendars are not the beginning of lunar awareness. They are formal records of a far older human practice. Before tablets and temple lists, people already watched the moon because its cycle was visible, useful, and emotionally persuasive. A moon calendar needs no palace. It needs eyes and memory. An open scholarly debate continues over how far back lunar counting can be traced in prehistoric objects. Some researchers interpret marked bones and carved sequences as lunar notations, while others argue for more general tallies or ritual markings. The debate is careful because a series of cuts can tempt the mind into certainty. Yet even the cautious position allows that people were tracking repeated events long before writing, and the moon was the brightest candidate in the night. You listen to the waves repeat themselves. Each one arrives differently, yet the pattern remains. The body understands this kind of time better than the mind admits. Breath in, breath out, sleep, waking, hunger, feeding, blood, birth, aging, death. A community that watches the moon may not be studying an object. It may be studying the rhythm of existence itself. That is why lunar astronomy feels sacred. The sun commands the day with overwhelming force. The moon persuades. It appears wounded and whole, absent and faithful, cold and intimate. It does not erase the stars, except when full and bright. It moves among them, changing place each night. Like a pale wanderer crossing a dark village. To track it is to track motion against the fixed background of heaven. You see why it could govern rites of passage. A child's naming might wait for a growing moon. A burial might occur under a waning one. A journey might begin when darkness protects the travellers. A gathering might be set for the full moon, because everyone can find the meeting place. The sky becomes a social organiser, and the moon is its most approachable official. A rather overworked official, but reliable enough. The zero civilization, seen through moonlight, becomes a culture of rhythm before law. It maps the heavens through flesh, water, and repeated nights. It does not separate astronomy from fertility, tide from hunger, or light from danger. Its calendar is not hanging in a temple office. It is carried in the womb, the shoreline, the sleeping pattern, the fishing ground, the remembered count of nights. You stand again and feel damp sand give slightly under your heels. The waterline has changed while you were watching. Stones that were dry are wet now. A dark channel that seemed crossable has deepened. The moon above looks unchanged in this brief moment, but its command is visible below. The sea has moved because the sky has spoken in silence. This is the lesson that would have entered ancient thought with force. The heavens are not far away. They reach into the blood, the tide, the night path, the hidden shell bed, the dangerous crossing, the birth hut, the burial ground, and the dream. To map the moon is to map vulnerability. Perhaps that is why lunar rites often feel softer than solar monuments, yet no less powerful. The moon belongs to thresholds. It rules dimness, not noon. It governs the half-seen, the private, the inward, the changing. It does not shout across the world. It stains the world silver and waits for you to notice. The tide rises another hand's breadth. The pools tremble. Somewhere behind you, a nightbird calls once, then vanishes into quiet. Above, the moon continues its old journey, lighting the sea and the skin with the same detached tenderness. You understand now that sacred astronomy was never only about distant stars. It was also about the nearest celestial body shaping the most intimate parts of life. The zero civilization may have mapped the sky by watching how moonlight entered water, body, ceremony, fear, and hope. And along the silver edge of the tide, you feel the oldest calendar breathing through the shore. You look upward and see the pale river of the night spilling across the sky. It is not a single star, not a single sign, but a broad mist of light, scattered and gathered at once. In places it is bright enough to seem almost solid. In others it thins into darkness, like breath fading on cold glass. The land beneath it grows quieter, as if even insects are listening. The Milky Band stretches from one edge of the world to the other. It feels like a road. You stand in an open place where no lamp weakens the dark. The grass brushes your ankles. A faint smell of wild mint rises where your foot has crushed the leaves. Far away, a dog barks once, and then remembers the dignity of silence. Above you, the starry river seems to cross the heavens with slow, impossible weight, as though the sky has been cut open and something older is shining through. A mainstream fact anchors the wonder. Modern astronomy confirms that the Milky Way is our own galaxy seen from within, its dense fields of stars forming a bright band across the night sky. Long before telescopes revealed its nature, people around the world interpreted that band as a road, river, tree, serpent, smoke trail, bridge, or path of souls. Scholars from institutions such as Harvard, Oxford, and the Smithsonian have studied how sky law often turns this luminous band into a structure connecting life. death and the beyond. That makes sense immediately. Unlike a single star, the Milky Band already looks like a place. It has direction, width, texture, and a strange internal darkness where dust clouds block the light. It crosses the whole night like a route that no human foot can take. Such a thing begs to become meaningful. Ancient people did not need anyone to tell them it mattered. The sky had drawn the line for them. You follow it with your eyes from horizon to horizon. One end seems to touch the land where darkness gathers behind a line of trees. The other sinks toward hills washed in starlight. If you were a traveller without a written map, such a band might feel like guidance. If you were mourning the dead, it might seem like a path they could take. If you were telling children where ancestors dwell, it would be very convenient that the heavens already provided a shining road. The dead do appreciate clear directions. In many later traditions, the Milky Band becomes a route between worlds. Sometimes it is imagined as a river crossed by spirits. Sometimes it is a trail made by animals, gods, birds, or the spilled substance of creation. These stories are not all the same, and they should not be blended into one careless soup. Yet the repeated instinct is striking. The band appears as a boundary and a connection at once. A river divides. A river also carries. That double meaning may be why it held such sacred force. A river on earth can nourish fields, drown villages, guide travellers, and mark the edge of known land. The river above does the same in imagination. It divides the sky into regions. It guides the eye. It invites stories of crossing, origin, and return. The sky becomes geography, not empty space. You imagine prehistoric watchers lying beside a fire while the Milky Band rises higher. One points to a dark gap in the bright stream. Another tells a story of a creature hiding there. Someone else names a place where souls climb after death. A child asks whether the road is cold. No one answers quickly. Some questions are too good to spoil with confidence. A quirky fringe tidbit appears and claims that many prehistoric monuments were aligned not only to sunrise and moonrise, but to the Milky Way's position at certain times of year. Some proposals are imaginative, especially when they treat every path, chamber, and carving as a sky-river diagram. Mainstream scholars remain cautious. Yet the idea that ancient people noticed the band's seasonal orientation is not unreasonable. A bright celestial feature crossing the sky would be hard to ignore. The difficulty is proving specific intent. The wonder is that watching was inevitable. An open scholarly debate continues over how prehistoric communities understood the Milky Band before written star myths appear. Some researchers suggest it may have shaped ritual landscapes and mortuary beliefs through oral tradition. Others argue that evidence remains too indirect to assign detailed meanings. The careful position allows room for awe without pretending to hear vanished words. The band mattered, but its exact stories are mostly gone. You stand near a shallow river, and its dark water reflects pieces of the sky. The earthly current moves with soft insistence over stones. Above it, the Milky Band appears still, though it is also part of motion too large to feel. For a moment, the two rivers seem related. One carries water through the land. One carries light through darkness. A person watching both could easily imagine the earth and heaven mirror one another. Mirrors are dangerous teachers. They show likeness, not sameness. The Zero civilization may have mapped the Milky Band as a major axis of sacred space, not with ink and not perhaps with strict constellations, but through stories of passage. The band could mark where the souls travel, where animals first descended, where rains are stored, where the ancestors speak, or where the world was first opened. A luminous road above gives structure to invisible journeys below. That is especially important for death. The dead vanish from the visible community, but not from thought. If their path can be imagined, grief gains a direction. A burial facing a certain part of the sky, a ceremony performed when the Milky Band appears in a particular way, or a story told beside the grave could all bind mourning to celestial order. The dead are no longer only gone, they are travelling, You can feel how comforting that would be. You can also feel how unsettling, because if the sky is a road for the dead, then every clear night becomes crowded. The bright band is no longer distant beauty. It is traffic, ancestors, spirits, animal powers, and unborn beings may pass along it. The world above becomes populated, and darkness becomes less empty than watched. The wind moves softly through the grass, the scent of mint fades, replaced by smoke from a low fire. Sparks rise upward and vanish before reaching the stars. For a brief instant, each spark resembles a soul attempting the road and failing, though perhaps that is too gloomy, even for history. Still, the image would not be lost on ancient minds. Fire, star, spirit, breath, all rise and disappear. The Milky Band might also have helped organize seasonal time. Its position changes through the night and across the year. At some times, it arches high. At others, it leans toward the horizon. A skilled watcher could connect its appearance with seasons of cold, heat, rain, migration, or gathering. Unlike the moon, it does not count days. Unlike the sun, it does not rule daylight. It offers a slower, grander orientation of the year, a calendar of the deep dark. You imagine a ceremony under its fullest brightness. People stand in a clearing, faces barely visible. The fire is lowered, perhaps deliberately, so the sky can dominate. A singer begins, not loudly, but with a tone that seems to match the width above. The song names the river of stars, the road of those who left, the place where animals cross, the first path made in the beginning. No one writes the song, the night itself holds it. This is how sacred astronomy becomes cosmology. A star map is not only a guide to light, it becomes an account of where life comes from, where death goes, and how the world remains connected. The Milky Band offers the prehistoric mind a shape, large enough to hold all of that. A road, a river, a serpent, a boundary, a wound, a bridge. The sky gives the symbol. Human sorrow gives it depth. You lower your gaze at last, and the land seems changed. The path beneath your feet feels like a small imitation of the path above. The river nearby murmurs like a translation. Even the smoke from the fire rises as if trying to join the pale stream. Nothing has been explained exactly, but the world has been arranged. The Zero civilization, if it lived through sacred attention, may have known the Milky Band as one of its greatest maps. It was not drawn by hand. It was received. It stretched across every camp and every burial ground, across mountains, shores, valleys, and plains, asking each people to name it in their own way. And perhaps, under that vast river of light, the oldest astronomers understood that mapping the stars was also mapping the journey between the living, the dead, and the mystery that carries both into darkness. You sit in the dark with a handful of small stones arranged on a flat hide. The fire has burned low enough that each pebble casts a tiny shadow. Someone has placed them in groups. 7 near the edge, 12 in a wider curve, 19 set apart in a careful line. Another cluster waits beside a length of cord, where knots divide the fibres into repeated spaces. The night is full of counting, not loud counting, not the stiff counting of a schoolroom, not the kind that makes children stare out of windows and question civilization. This is older and softer. It is counting because the moon returns. Counting because seasons must be trusted. Counting because a ceremony must happen at the right interval. Counting because the sky is generous with pattern, but not generous enough to explain itself. You look upward and see order everywhere. The moon has phases. The sun has turning points. Certain stars rise in their seasons. Some bright bodies wander against the fixed field. The year repeats, but not cleanly. The lunar month does not fit neatly into the solar year, which is exactly the sort of cosmic inconvenience that forces human intelligence to stretch. The heavens are beautiful. They are also poor administrators. A mainstream fact steadies this field of stones. Ancient written civilizations such as Mesopotamia developed advanced numerical astronomy using systems that included base 60 counting, lunar months, intercalation, and careful records of celestial motion. Scholars at Yale, Chicago, and other major institutions have studied those later mathematical traditions through clay tablets. Yet the roots of number sense are older than writing, visible in prehistoric tally marks, measured monuments, and repeated symbolic groupings. Numbers began as touchable things: a finger, a notch, a pebble, a knot, a bone mark, a row of shells, a rhythm in a song. Before number becomes abstract, it lives in the body. 10 fingers are always nearby, unless the day has gone very badly. 20 fingers and toes give another system. 12 moons nearly fill a year, but not quite. 7 days fit one visible quarter of the lunar cycle, roughly enough to become memorable. 19 solar years come close to matching 235 lunar months, a later discovery that shows how stubbornly people try to reconcile sun and moon. The sky invites arithmetic because it refuses simplicity. You imagine an ancient watcher moving stones across Hyde. 1 stone for each night since the new moon, 1 pile for the moon since winter cold, 1 longer count for the return of a star. A mistake matters. Count badly, and a gathering may come too soon. Count badly, and the people may wait in hunger for a sign that has already passed. Count badly, and authority begins to look embarrassed, which is rarely healthy for sacred professionals. So counting becomes sacred discipline. The number 12 may arise naturally from the moons that pass through a solar year. It is not exact, but it is close enough to tempt the mind. 12 becomes a circle, a cycle, a way to divide fullness. Later societies divide the sky into 12 regions, months into named sequences, and ritual calendars into ordered rounds. Yet long before those formal systems, the rough experience of 12 moons would have pressed itself into memory. A year feels like a necklace of moons. The number 7 may come from the moon's visible changes. New, half, full, half again, with about 7 days between the main phases. Many later cultures give 7 a sacred force, tying it to planets, days, heavens, or ritual intervals. Prehistoric evidence cannot prove the full later symbolism, but lunar observation makes the number emotionally plausible. 7 becomes a step in the moon's slow breathing. 19 belongs to a more difficult beauty. Later astronomers recognize that 19 solar years closely align with 235 lunar months. This cycle helped calendars reconcile moon and sun. Whether prehistoric communities discovered such a relationship is debated, and caution is necessary. Still, long observation of mismatched cycles could lead to corrections, added months, and remembered intervals that kept ceremonies from drifting out of season. A calendar is a negotiation. The sun and moon do not agree easily. A quirky tidbit appears and claims that some prehistoric monuments encode sophisticated numerical constants, including precise measures of Earth, planetary cycles, or hidden geometry. Many such claims are doubtful, especially when they rely on choosing convenient measurements after the fact. The ancient builders were brilliant, but they should not be forced into being secret professors of modern mathematics. That is a strange burden to place on people already busy moving enormous stones without wheels. Still, the presence of number is real. You see it in repeated post holes. You see it in stone circles. You see it in notches, burials, beads, and planned spaces. Repetition creates countability. Countability creates expectation. Expectation creates ritual timing. The sacred world becomes numerical without becoming cold. Numbers do not remove awe. They give awe a skeleton. You touch the cord beside the stones. The knots are firm, darkened by grease and handling. A cord like this could track nights, journeys, debts, offerings, or kinship lines. It could be passed between hands while a story is spoken. Each knot could prompt a verse, a season, a name, a warning. The count and the story would strengthen one another, memory-like structure. This is why numbers hidden in night may matter so deeply. Sacred astronomy requires repeated observation, but observation alone can drown in detail. Numbers gather the detail into pattern. They say, this phase returns after so many nights. This star appears after so many moons. This ceremony repeats when the count is complete. The sky becomes legible because humans learn to compress its motion into remembered intervals. An open scholarly debate continues over how mathematically advanced prehistoric skywatchers were before writing. Some researchers argue that monument layouts and artifact markings reveal careful measurement and long-term numerical tracking. Others warn that interpretation can become too generous, finding grand mathematics where practical counting or ritual grouping is enough. The responsible path remains narrow, but it does not diminish the achievement. Even practical counting can be profound when applied across generations. You listen to the small click of pebble against pebble as the watcher changes the arrangement. The sound is gentle, but it carries authority. Each movement says the year is being handled, time is being divided, the invisible is becoming countable. Around the fire, others watch with trust, suspicion, boredom, and perhaps one person silently wishing the explanation would end before the soup cools. Human beings remain human, even under sacred stars. The zero civilization appears here as a numerical imagination before written mathematics. It maps the heavens through repeated counts embedded in ritual, body, object, and place. Its numbers are not floating abstractions. They are tied to hunger, fertility, travel, tides, planting, mourning, and the return of light. The first equations may have been sung. The first tables may have been walked. The first calendars may have been touched with the thumb. You lift one stone from the hide and feel its weight. It is almost nothing. Yet in the right system, it can hold a night, a moon, a season, or an obligation. Place enough small things in order, and the heavens become manageable. Not controlled, never controlled, but followed with a little less fear. Above you, the stars continue beyond counting. Any pattern humans make is small beside that glittering abundance. Still, the smallness is not failure. It is the beginning of thought. A handful of stones cannot contain the sky, but it can help a person return to the same ceremony at the proper moon. It can help a child learn that time is patterned. It can help a community remember when darkness begins to turn back toward light. The watcher closes their hand around the last pebble. The fire sighs. The moon moves almost invisibly among the stars. Somewhere within the night, number and mystery sit together without argument. And you feel how the oldest sacred astronomers may have discovered that the heavens were not only seen, feared, and worshipped. They were counted, slowly and reverently, one returning light at a time. You enter a room far from the ancient night, where the air smells of paper, dust, coffee, and quiet disagreement. Shelves rise around you in disciplined rows. Maps lie open on long tables, photographs of stones, bones, chambers, coastlines, and painted walls are spread beneath lamps. Outside the window, traffic moves with modern impatience, but inside, the dead are being argued over very carefully. This is where the silence meets scholarship. A researcher leans over a site plan, tracing a line from one stone to a notch on the horizon. Another shakes their head. A third opens a folder of measurements and frowns in a way that suggests both intelligence and insufficient sleep. Nobody is wearing a dramatic cloak, which is disappointing but probably best for the data. The mystery of sacred astronomy does not survive because everyone agrees. It survives because agreement is difficult. The first disagreement concerns intention. When a monument points towards sunrise, does that mean the builders planned it? Perhaps. When a chamber catches light at a solstice, is that deliberate? Often, yes, especially when the design is too precise to be casual. But when dozens of stones, ridges, openings, and sightlines exist. Some will inevitably point towards something interesting. The sky is large, and coincidence is annoyingly talented. So scholars measure, they check horizons, they study construction phases, they compare nearby sites, they ask whether an alignment occurs once, many times, or only after someone has chosen the most attractive line. They examine whether the proposed celestial event would have been visible when the monument was built. Not merely today. The sky changes, and archaeology has to change with it. A mainstream fact helps frame this careful work. Archaeastronomy, the study of how past peoples understood celestial phenomena, has grown into a recognized field involving archaeology, anthropology, astronomy, and history. Scholars connected with universities such as Oxford, Leicester, and Brown have contributed to debates over prehistoric alignments, calendars, and cosmological landscapes. The field is serious, but it is also cautious because its evidence is often fragmentary. Fragmentary evidence is a difficult dinner guest. It arrives with half a story and expects everyone to behave. You look at a photograph of a stone circle. On the surface, the site seems simple. Upright stones, open sky, a broad horizon. Yet beneath the photograph lies a swarm of questions. Which stones are original? Which have fallen or been restored? Did vegetation once block the view? Was the local climate different? Did builders care about the sun, the moon, ancestors, territory, ceremony, or all of these at once? The past does not come with labels. A second disagreement concerns symbolism. One scholar sees an animal carving as a seasonal marker. Another sees a clan emblem. Another sees a mythic being. Another says that animals mattered because they were animals, which is refreshingly sensible and still not enough. Symbols in ancient societies often carried several meanings. A carved bird might speak of migration, death, sky, ancestry, and timing together. Modern interpretation likes separation. Ancient ritual often preferred mixture. You walk past a case holding replicas of marked bones. Under the glass, notches run in uneven sequences. Some researchers interpret such marks as lunar counts. Others say they may record animals, days, exchanges, rites, or simple tallies. Both sides can point to patterns. Both sides can also point to uncertainty. A line of cuts is not a confession. It does not politely announce that it was counting the moon, although that would save everyone several decades of debate. The third disagreement is about scale. Was prehistoric star knowledge local, practical, and varied, or part of a broader shared symbolic system? Some scholars emphasize independent invention. People everywhere saw the moon, seasons, and horizon shifts. So similar practices could emerge separately. Others point to trade networks, migration, and repeated forms as signs that ideas travelled widely. Both views can be true in different places. This is where the zero civilization becomes most fragile. If it is imagined as a single lost empire, scholarship asks for cities, graves, tools, inscriptions, food systems, settlement patterns, and material continuity. Without those, the claim collapses into mist. But if it is understood as a deep tradition of sacred observation shared unevenly across prehistoric communities, the idea becomes harder to dismiss entirely. It becomes less glamorous, but more plausible. A pattern can exist without an empire. A quirky tidbit comes from the long history of overly confident alignments. In past centuries, enthusiastic writers sometimes claim that nearly every old stone pointed to a star, planet, or mathematical secret. Some even found elaborate cosmic codes in sites that later proved disturbed, misdated, or misread. The habit has not vanished. Give a determined person enough monuments and enough stars, and they may eventually discover that ancient people predicted their favourite breakfast. The warning is useful. Wonder needs discipline. An open scholarly debate continues over how to balance imagination with evidence in studying prehistoric astronomy. Some researchers argue that excessive skepticism risks stripping ancient people of intellectual richness. Others warn that excessive speculation turns real archaeology into a mirror for modern desire. Between those positions lies the difficult work of respectful uncertainty. The dead deserve neither condescension nor invention. You sit at the table and turn a map under the lamp. The paper is smooth, white, and far removed from wet grass, cave smoke, and moonlit tide. Yet the same ancient question moves across it. What did they know? How did they know it? What did the sky mean to them? Each line drawn by a modern researcher is an attempt to recover a vanished act of looking. There is something moving about that. A scholar does not only study stones, they study attention fossilized in placement. They study choices made by hands no longer warm. They study the gap between what a monument does and what its builders believed it was doing. That gap cannot always be closed. Sometimes it should not be closed too quickly. Mystery is not failure. It is part of the evidence. You imagine two archaeologists standing at a prehistoric site before dawn. One is skeptical, the other is hopeful. Both are cold. The horizon begins to pale. They wait to see whether sunlight enters a gap as predicted. For several minutes, nobody says anything. Then a line of light touches stone. The hopeful one smiles. The skeptical one checks the measurements. Both reactions are necessary. Without wonder, research becomes dry. Without caution, becomes myth pretending to be research. The best scholars know that ancient people were neither simple nor supernatural. They could observe carefully, remember deeply, and build impressively. They could also make mistakes, change meanings, reuse old places, and leave behind evidence that fools modern interpreters. To study sacred astronomy is to accept a human past with intelligence, contradiction, and ambiguity. The room grows darker as evening settles outside the window. The lamps glow over the maps. A photograph of a winter sunrise lies beside a chart of lunar standstills. A cave painting reproduction rests near a paper on ancient climate. The materials do not solve one another, but they begin to converse. Perhaps that is what scholarship really reveals. Not a clean answer, but a disciplined conversation with fragments. One fragment says light entered a tomb. Another says bones were marked. Another says coastlines drowned. Another says pillars were carved. Another says the sky itself was changing. The task is not to force them into one grand secret, but to listen for patterns without silencing difference. You leave the room with less certainty than you wanted, but more respect than you expected. The stones are still stones. The stars are still distant. The evidence remains incomplete. Yet the debates themselves reveal something important. Modern scholars argue because the ancient material is rich enough to sustain argument. Empty things do not provoke such careful disagreement, and somewhere beyond the window, the same old sky rises over libraries, ruins, coastlines, and sleeping cities, offering no final answer, only the patient invitation to keep looking. You return to the ancient night with a quieter question now. Not whether the stars were watched, because they were. Not whether the moon was counted, because the evidence leans strongly toward it. Not whether stones, chambers, bones, rivers, and painted walls could hold memory, because human beings have always placed memory wherever the hand can reach. The question becomes simpler. Why did it matter so much? You stand near the edge of a settlement where smoke rises from low shelters. The ground is dry and packed by many feet. A child cries once, then is comforted. Someone turns a pot in the embers. Someone scrapes a hide with steady strokes. The night sky hangs above this ordinary labour, immense and glittering, but the people beneath it do not watch from leisure. They watch because their lives are tied to timing. A mainstream historical fact gives the scene its foundation. Archaeological research from major institutions, including Stanford, Cambridge, and the University of Arizona, confirms that early farming communities depended heavily on seasonal cycles for planting, harvesting, storage, and animal management. Even hunter-gatherer groups required careful knowledge of migrations, ripening plants, water sources, and weather shifts. The sky was useful because survival was seasonal. You look toward a field not yet green. Seeds wait in woven containers. Plant too early, and frost may kill the young shoots. Plant too late, and the heat may shorten growth. Harvest too soon, and food is wasted. Harvest too late, and storms, animals, or rival hands may take it. The sun's movement along the horizon becomes more than wonder. It becomes a warning, a permission, and sometimes a gamble. The stars helped people decide when to trust the earth. That is no small trust. The first reason, then, is food. Sacred astronomy grew from hunger as much as awe. The returning light told people when warmth might come. Certain stars announced the season of rain or dry winds. The moon brightened nights for gathering, travel, fishing, and hunting. Tides exposed shellfish or hid crossing places. A sky map was also a menu, though a rather poetic and difficult one. You can almost hear a weary ancient parent saying, "Yes, the heavens are majestic, but please notice the grain." The second reason is death. Every community must decide what to do with bodies that no longer breathe. That decision is never only practical. Burial direction, grave goods, timing of mourning, and ceremonies of return all reveal how people imagine the dead continuing, transforming, or joining something larger. The sky offered a vast pattern into which grief could be placed. A tomb touched by sunrise does not end death. It gives sorrow a shape. You walk toward a burial mound where grass moves in silver moonlight. The mound is low, not grand, but it changes the land around it. Someone chose this place. Someone carried the body. Someone placed objects near the hands. Perhaps the burial faced a sunrise, a mountain, a river, or a star's rising. Perhaps no one can now say, yet the act itself says that the dead were located within a meaningful world. The living need that, without meaning, grief becomes a room with no door. Celestial order can make a door, even if it opens only in imagination. The sun returns after darkness. The moon disappears and comes back. Stars set and rise again. These visible recoveries do not prove resurrection, but they make the idea thinkable. They teach loss through repetition. The third reason is ceremony. A community needs shared moments when private lives become part of a larger rhythm. Festivals, initiations, marriages, mourning rites, feasts, and councils all gain force when tied to celestial timing. The event feels less arbitrary. It happens because the moon is full, because the solstice has come, because a bright star rises before dawn. The sky becomes the invitation. No one can accuse the organizer of choosing a date simply because their cousin was available. A quirky tidbit appears in some interpretations of prehistoric gathering sites. Researchers and independent writers have suggested that certain feasting events may have been timed to spectacular sky moments. Perhaps lunar standstills, solstices, or seasonal star risings. Direct proof is rare, and some claims wander cheerfully beyond the fence. Still, the general idea is plausible. A community feast under a known sky event would bind appetite to awe with impressive efficiency. You imagine such a gathering. Fires burn in a wide ring. Meat roasts slowly, fat dripping into flame with sharp little hisses. People arrive from different valleys carrying food, shells, stone blades, pigments, and gossip, because no civilization has ever advanced beyond gossip. Above them, the moon grows full. The timing tells everyone this meeting belongs to more than convenience. The fourth reason is navigation. Stars give direction when landmarks vanish in darkness or open water. The northern turning, bright seasonal stars, lunar paths, and the Milky Band can help travelers orient themselves across plains, deserts, rivers, and seas. Navigation is practical, but also becomes sacred because travel is dangerous. A guiding star can feel like protection. You cross an imagined steppe at night. The land is nearly featureless. Grass whispers under a cold wind. The horizon is a black circle. Without the sky, the world becomes uncertain. With the sky, direction returns. A familiar star rising from a familiar quarter gives the body confidence to move. That confidence can save lives. The fifth reason is belonging. This may be the deepest reason of all. To learn the sky of a people is to enter their memory. You are taught which stars matter, which moon brings gathering, which dawn belongs to the dead, which direction is holy, which story explains the bright river above. The same physical sky becomes different through culture. It becomes yours because others teach you how to see it. An open scholarly debate continues over whether prehistoric astronomy should be understood mainly as practical science, religious symbolism, social control, or embodied landscape memory. Some scholars emphasize agriculture and subsistence. Others emphasize ritual, power, and identity. A balanced view allows the sky to do many things at once. Ancient life did not divide usefulness from sacredness as neatly as modern categories prefer. The sky could feed you. It could frighten you. It could organize your dead. It could tell you where you were. You stand now at the settlement edge as dawn begins to pale the east. People stir inside their shelters. A dog stretches. Smoke thickens. Someone carries water. A child points upward at a fading star, and an adult answers with a name you cannot hear. That small exchange may be the true heart of sacred astronomy. Not a monument, not a theory. A name given at the right moment. The zero civilization, understood as a hidden way of seeing, mapped the stars because stars connected everything that mattered. Food, birth, death, travel, weather, memory, and identity all passed through the heavens. Mapping was not only measuring, it was making a home inside time. You feel the first warmth of sunrise touch your face. The stars withdraw, but they do not vanish from thought. Their work continues in planting, mourning, walking, gathering, counting, and belonging. The sky has entered the day through human habit, and perhaps that is why the oldest star maps were sacred. They did not merely tell people what was above them, they told people how to live beneath it. You stand among traces that do not call themselves ruins. There are no broken columns here, no fallen palace steps, no royal faces chipped from stone. The ground holds subtler remains, a scatter of flint, a worn path near a spring, a burial mound softened by weather. A standing stone leaned slightly toward one side. A hilltop where people once watched the horizon so often that the place itself seems trained to face the dawn. This is what was forgotten, not always the objects. Some objects endure with stubborn grace. What vanishes first is the way of seeing that made them necessary. A stone circle becomes a curiosity. A notch on bone becomes a museum label. A painted animal becomes art, separated from the breath, fear, song, and season that once surrounded it. The thing remains, but the living system around it dissolves. Forgetting is not only loss, it is transformation. A mainstream fact gives this forgetting its historical shape. Archaeologists confirm that as farming villages expanded, and later as urban societies formed in places such as Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus region, and China, older traditions were often absorbed into new calendars, temples, myths, and political systems. Research from institutions such as Yale, Chicago, and Oxford has shown that early states formalized ritual time through written records, priesthoods, taxation cycles, and public ceremonies. The sky did not disappear, it was reorganized. The old watcher became an official, the seasonal gathering became a festival. The horizon line became a temple axis. The moon count became a regulated calendar. You imagine a valley where people once walked before dawn to witness winter light enter a chamber. Generations later, a larger settlement grows nearby. Fields spread, storage buildings rise, leaders emerge, specialists keep records. The old chamber remains, but its meaning changes. It may become an ancestor place, a shrine, a forbidden hill, a story told to children, or simply a strange mound nobody wants to disturb after sunset. Meaning does not die cleanly, it lingers in altered forms. The zero civilization, if understood as a forgotten way of mapping time, may have vanished through success rather than disaster. Its observations work so well that later cultures inherited them without remembering the hands that shaped them. Once a calendar becomes official, few people ask which unnamed watchers learned the pattern first. Once a temple marks the solstice, the older hilltop beside it fades from memory. Once a god receives the star, the old star name disappears. This is how deep history is often erased, not by fire, by replacement. A quirky tidbit from the edges of cultural memory concerns old folk beliefs around prehistoric stones. In many regions, local stories claim that ancient stones dance at midnight, drink from rivers, heal sickness, punish thieves, or move back when taken away. Scholars do not treat these tales as direct records of the builders' beliefs. Still, they reveal that later communities continued to sense a power around places they no longer understood. The memory lost its explanation but kept its unease. That unease matters. When a sacred system fades, people do not always become indifferent. They inherit fragments that feel charged. A carved sign becomes a charm. A burial mound becomes a fairy hill. A stone alignment becomes the work of giants. A solstice chamber becomes a place of miracles, omens, or local jokes told with one eye on the dark. The intellectual structure may be gone, yet emotional gravity remains. You walk beside a grass-covered mound at twilight. Sheep graze nearby, unconcerned with cosmic inheritance, which is very sensible of them. The mound looks ordinary until you notice its placement. It faces a valley opening where the sun lowers in late year. A later village stands in the distance, its church tower or temple spire replacing older sacred markers. One system has grown over another like moss over carved stone. The past is still there. It is just harder to read. An open scholarly debate continues over how much continuity links prehistoric sacred astronomy with later ancient religions. Some researchers see persistent themes, including solar rebirth, lunar cycles, cosmic mountains, sacred directions, and star-related deities. Others warn that centuries or millennia of change make direct lines difficult to prove. The careful answer may be that continuity often survives as pattern rather than exact doctrine. Ideas travel by changing their clothes. A sunrise rite can become a royal ceremony, a moon count can become a priestly calendar, an ancestral star can become a god's emblem, a sacred road in the sky can become a path of souls in later myth. You look across the landscape and see how layers of time press together. The oldest layer is not simple darkness. It is full of attention, watching, counting, aligning, and remembering. Above it lies the age of villages, where seasonal knowledge becomes tied to fields and herd management. Above that lies the age of towns and temples, where ritual timing becomes public authority. Above that lies writing, which preserves some things brilliantly while making others vanish by refusing to record them. Writing is a lamp. It is also a shadow maker. Once written, history begins. Everything before it can seem mute by comparison. Kings speak loudly through inscriptions. Merchants speak through accounts. Priests speak through hymns and omens. The prehistoric watcher, who knew the sky without writing, has no such voice. Their knowledge survives only if it enters stone, custom, myth, or inherited practice. Otherwise, it is lost like breath in cold air. You feel that loss as the evening cools. The grass brushes your hands. A small bird lifts from the mound and disappears into the hedge. Overhead, the first star appears. You wonder how many names it has carried. Perhaps an Ice Age hunter gave it one name, a farming village another, a temple priest another, a poet another, and an astronomer another. The star remains, but every name is a different doorway. What was forgotten then was not the sky. The sky remained. What was forgotten was the earliest human agreement with it, the habit of watching from particular stones, the songs that turned horizon points into memory, the stories that linked animal movement with star rising, the ceremonies that made moonlight social, the gestures that taught children how to enter cosmic time. A civilization can vanish without buildings falling. It can vanish when its meanings are no longer performed. The Zero civilization may have been just that, a performed civilization. It lived whenever people gathered at the correct dawn, counted the proper moon, faced the sacred north, told the river of stars to the grieving, and placed the dead where returning light could find them. Its cities were moments, its roads were seasonal paths, its archives were bodies trained by repetition. That kind of civilization leaves little behind, but it may shape everything that follows. You stand still as darkness gathers fully. The mound becomes a darker curve against dark land. The sky brightens into thousands of points. Modern knowledge can name many of them, measure their distance, describe their chemistry, and chart their motion. Yet naming does not restore the oldest relationship. You cannot fully recover the songs, gestures, taboos, jokes, fears, and whispered instructions that made the ancient sky intimate. Still, something can be sensed. The forgotten world was not empty before writing. It was crowded with pattern. It was alive with watched light, counted darkness, remembered seasons, and sacred directions. Its people did not wait for civilization to begin. They were already building civilization in the mind, in the landscape, and in the slow agreement between earth and sky. And perhaps the deepest forgetting is our own assumption that history begins when words appear, rather than when human eyes first learn to return to the same star with a question they could not stop asking. You stand beneath the unfinished sky, where every answer seems to fade just before it becomes solid. The night is calm, the ground is cool beneath your feet. A faint wind moves through dry grass, carrying the scent of earth, smoke, and distant water. Above you, the stars appear countless, though you know that every ancient watcher saw them as a pattern before seeing them as number. This is where the oldest map remains open. No hand reaches down to complete it. No stone suddenly speaks. No buried tablet rises from the soil with a tidy explanation, which is honestly inconsiderate after so much waiting. The heavens keep their distance. The earth keeps its fragments. Between them, human imagination continues the work it began long before written history. You look toward the horizon, where the dark land cuts a rough line beneath the stars. That edge once taught people the return of the sun. It taught them that light moved with the year, that darkness could grow and shrink, that seasons had doors. A notch between hills could become a promise. A standing stone could become a memory. A dawn could become a ceremony repeated for so long that repetition itself became truth. A mainstream fact remains steady here. Archaeology confirms that prehistoric people built monuments, marked objects, painted caves, buried their dead with care, and created symbolic worlds long before writing appeared. Research from major institutions, including Oxford, Yale, Stanford, and the Smithsonian, continues to show that the ancient past was intellectually rich, socially complex, and deeply observant. The evidence does not require a vanished empire. It requires respect. That is the quieter revelation. The Zero civilization, if the phrase is allowed its gentlest meaning, may never have been a kingdom. It may not have had a capital, a ruler, a flag, or a single language. It may have been a shared human achievement scattered across time, a civilization of attention before cities, a civilization of rhythm before documents, a civilization made whenever people looked upward and decided the sky was not random. You feel that idea settle slowly. A civilization can be made of habits. It can be made of gatherings before dawn, moon counts kept by touch, burial rites timed to returning light, animal stories placed among stars, and paths walked beneath the milky band. It can be made of elders teaching children where to stand when the year turns. It can be made of fear, hunger, grief, weather, and the need to belong somewhere inside time. The sky offered pattern. Humans answered with meaning. That answer changed everything. A star is only a star until someone waits for it. A moon is only a moon until someone counts by it. A sunrise is only light until a community gathers in silence because it arrives in the old place again. Sacred astronomy begins at that threshold. When observation becomes memory, memory becomes ritual, and ritual becomes a world people can live inside. You walk through this world one last time. Not through one place, but through many. A cave wall breathes with painted animals in firelight. A shore glows beneath a moon that draws the tide. A stone chamber holds darkness until winter sunlight enters. A field of pillars stands under stars, carved creatures watching from pale surfaces. A mound faces a sky no one can now fully translate. Each place holds a piece. None holds the whole. A quirky tidbit still drifts at the edge of the story. Some people will always imagine the Zero civilization as a lost superculture with perfect astronomy, hidden machines, and secret masters guiding later history from behind the curtain. It is an enjoyable image, in the same way a thunderstorm is enjoyable when you are indoors and reasonably insured. But the deeper wonder needs no hidden machines. It is already astonishing that human beings, with stone tools and memory, could turn the sky into a sacred map. The real mystery is not that they knew everything. The real mystery is how much they learned by watching. An open scholarly debate continues over the scale, precision, and meaning of prehistoric astronomy. Some researchers emphasize practical calendars and seasonal survival. Others explore ritual landscapes, symbolic animals, mortuary alignments, and deep oral memory. Some warn against reading too much into scattered fragments. Others warn against assuming ancient people noticed too little. The debate does not close the story. It keeps it honest. And honesty has its own beauty. You cannot prove every star story. You cannot recover every lost name. You cannot know exactly what a carved sign meant to the hand that made it. Yet you can stand among the fragments and feel the larger human movement. Eyes lifted, hands marked, stones raised, bodies buried, children taught, seasons counted, the dead placed within a cosmos that seemed to return what it took. Perhaps that is enough. The unfinished sky reveals that civilization may begin before administration, before walls, before ledgers, before laws pressed into clay. It begins when people share a pattern and live by it. It begins when a community trusts that tomorrow is connected to yesterday. It begins when the heavens become not merely distant lights, but a structure for food, grief, memory, ceremony, and hope. You look upward and imagine those early watchers under different stars. Their north was not always yours. Their coastlines were not yours. Their animals, languages, songs, and fears have mostly vanished. Yet their posture is familiar. The tilted head, the narrowed eyes as the waiting, the quiet surprise that the sky seems to contain order and that human life might somehow fit within it. Across the darkness, time folds gently. You are not separate from them in that gesture. You still look for signs. You still mark calendars. You still wake to seasons. You still give meaning to anniversaries, moons, storms, and sunsets. The tools have changed, and the names have changed, but the old impulse remains. You want the world to be readable. You want loss to have direction. You want time to be more than disappearance. The stars do not answer clearly. They never have, but they invite attention, and attention is where sacred astronomy begins. The Zero civilization may have mapped the stars because mapping was a way of not being lost. Not lost in the year, not lost after death, not lost when seas rose, animals moved, storms came, or children asked where the dead had gone. The map did not remove uncertainty. It gave uncertainty a shape. That shape still hovers above you. The sky remains unfinished because every generation adds its own seeing. Ancient watchers gave it animals, rivers, ancestors, gates, wheels, and sacred centers. Later civilizations gave it gods, calendars, mathematics, and imperial omens. Modern science gives it galaxies, distances, fusion, gravity, and expanding space. None of these cancels the others completely. Each reveals a different human need beneath the same darkness. You breathe slowly. The stars brighten as your eyes adjust. The silence feels immense, but not empty. Somewhere in that silence lie the first horizon maps, the first moon counts, the first stories of a road for souls, the first careful decision to place stone where light would return. They are not fully recoverable, they are not fully gone, and perhaps the story is not yet complete. The night softens now. The hard edges of the question begin to blur. You no longer need to solve every stone, every carving, every notch, every vanished name. Some mysteries are not doors to be forced open. Some are rooms where the mind may rest, surrounded by old light and patient shadows. You let the sky remain wide above you. The ancient watchers do not need to become perfect, and the lost past does not need to become louder than evidence allows. It is enough to imagine them as human, tired, watchful, hungry, grieving, clever, reverent, and sometimes wrong. It is enough to see them standing beneath the same turning darkness, making meaning with what they had. The fire beside you lowers into red ash. The wind becomes gentler. The stars continue their quiet work, holding no hurry, asking no answer, shining over stones, rivers, cities, fields, bedrooms, and sleeping minds. Somewhere, beyond the reach of history, an unnamed watcher lifts a hand toward a familiar light. You do not need to follow the gesture all the way. Let it fade softly. Let the horizon darken. Let the old map remain open, unfinished, and kind. And as the night carries you downward into rest, imagine the first star watchers still keeping their calm vigil, not far away in spirit, but just beyond the edge of memory, beneath a sky that has always been larger than words. End of script. Good night.